What's up, guys, gals, and M-Pals? Let me make a group call and see if we can get our two contestants together at last. We got an Izzybear713.
Hey, what's up? Here, let me just turn on my camera really fast.
And we got a Xanderhal.
I'm actually live right now, so just be careful what you say, alright?
No gamer words?
No gamer words, please.
Oh.
Yeah, none.
It's okay, I get them out of my system before every stream.
Man, that really limits the coverage. Gosh.
Alrighty.
So I'm not seeing you yet, Xanderhal. I don't know why.
Yeah, here, let me, since my camera's on, it's trying. I set it to be my my other camera, because I have like an older one I used to use before I got this new one.
Okay.
It's really bad, so it's going to be like zoomed in right on my face. You'll be able to see basically every pore, but it should be working. Hold on.
Oh, I got a symbol. That's.
I'm just going to keep on trying to refresh it and see what happens.
Currently, the debate looks like me versus me, which I would like to state for the record would also be entertaining. Okay.
Speaking of which, I'm going to increase your volume
Actually,
a little bit, Izzy.
Let me just plug this. Plug it back in. All right, let's see if that does it.
It wouldn't be a lefty debate without a whole bunch of technical problems.
True. I agree with chat, too. I would totally destroy myself in the marketplace of ideas.
We got a Xanderhal.
Hey!
We're good. Alrighty.
Give me just 2 seconds to resize the window so it's not just a picture of your forehead.
We cannot see every pore, but it is definitely a quality drop from your usual content.
Yeah, it's the, I think it's like the C9, 290 or something. I'm using the, like my normal camera is the C970 something from Logitech, and this one's like the ultra downgraded, like $12 camera for people who are starting streaming.
Okay.
I remember that cam. My first one was worse, don't feel bad. I started on a PS4 with a PS4 cam. It was garbage. That's
actually what I used early on as well, but I actually quickly replaced it with the current cam that you're seeing right now, which wasn't too big of an upgrade, but like I was using one of those. I had this game. People are gonna cringe because it's lib shit, but it was this Harry Potter game that you you could do spells and shit like that with, and it required a camera. Listen, Harry Potter was written by a TERF, and liberals love it. Okay, so I mean,
we were all children once, Xanderhal.
I literally have a Slytherin banner that fell off the wall. I think it's behind the couch right now. Like I can't judge.
It's weird. I for some reason separate Harry Potter itself as just like a mythos from the TERF, but I really shouldn't. I guess they came from the TERF brain.
I mean, it's the same with Minecraft, right? Like, I'm a huge Minecraft fan, but every time I'm reminded, whenever I see a Notch tweet, I'm like, At least there, though, you know, he doesn't make any money off the game anymore. He's not affiliated with it anymore. The team that's taken over production of the game seems to be not fond of him and very progressive. So, I mean, you know, I just
gotta say, I don't really know what either of y'all are talking about. Hatsune Miku made Minecraft.
I thought that was Hatsune Miku.
That is true. I actually, I don't know if you've heard of this game. It's actually like the trailer for it is really big on YouTube, and I'm so excited for it. It's called Hytale, Hytale. It's going to be basically a spiritual successor to Minecraft, made by a bunch of modders and like prominent community members from the Hypixel Minecraft server, and I was really happy to find out one of the people working on the game is actually trans, and I was like, I made a tweet saying, nice, one of the devs is actually a trans woman, and this is a huge upgrade from Minecraft, which was originally made by a Nazi, and she responded and said, I thought Minecraft was made by Hatsune Miku, and then like a winky face. So I actually, that was my parasocial boost I got right there, the having one of the devs of the game I'm extremely excited for noticed me, and yeah, it was pretty cool.
All right, do you want me to do a quick introduction?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Friday Night Debate here in the Terror Dome. Our two opponents, of course, are Izzybear713, going by she, her pronouns, and Xanderhal by he, him. I am Lance of the Serfs over at twitch.tv/theserfstv. I want to thank both contestants today for agreeing to do this, all in good faith, of course. And, of course, to everyone over on the YouTube side of things, hello. It's good to hear all y'all. What this is basically going to be is it's going to be pretty freehand. I'm not going to be too involved. If both of you start yelling over each other to the point where no one can understand what you're saying, or things just get a little bit too spicy, I'll just ask you both to basically take a little step back and let each one speak. But you're both, mature internet personalities, so I'm sure you know about how this takes place. And otherwise, I will leave it to the two of you and step back and just exploit your labor. All right.
I guess, is it fine if I sort of start?
Yeah, honestly, you can take it away. We'll go from there.
Okay. So I actually hadn't heard of you before until after my talk with Corvidae, when I got an ad from you. And you started tweeting about me quite a bit, and I actually quote tweeted you, and I think I said, "Don't care, didn't ask, plus you're white." I think it's a pretty good meme. But you seem to actually want to discuss the issues that you seem to take with me. So I'm interested to see you go into detail on these claims. I know you can't really do all the nuance on Twitter. So you tweeted,
yeah, definitely.
Okay, so you tweeted at me saying Xanderhal talking about trans dating and his genital preference, saying dumb shit like we need debate bro white cishets because no one would listen to SJWs. At Xanderhal TV, we don't need you to speak on our issues. You aren't equipped. You don't speak for communities you don't represent to. You just drop the ball so many times. We're good without the anti-SJW left. Call me a woke scold all you want. I'll continue saying to reduce harm, instead of using right-wing insults and points to rally against people critical of me. So I guess, could we go through this tweet and kind of see where your issues with me lie?
Got a few, and I can definitely help hone and narrow them in pretty easy. So I'm not going to lie, I actually haven't watched a lot of your content. I know after your first big video that I watched a little bit because I friended Faraday Speaks pretty quickly after he came out with his video. We talked on my stream a few times, and we've talked in a couple other places. I bring him in on some charity events. Cool dude. And I knew y'all were working, so I checked out a little bit of your content back then, but then kind of really haven't taken it in much myself. And I tend not to at too many people on Twitter, even when I'm giving critique, because I just don't see a fucking point in it. Twitter isn't, like you just said, you can't actually get any nuance or conversation through Twitter. I usually give my critiques for my viewers, my followers, and my listeners to hear and talk about and engage with. And then when something bigger comes up and it can turn into a convo, I at. So in that specifically, I now currently list you with the other anti-SJW left. That's not to say that you're a grifter or not actually believing or supporting left-wing ideologies to an extent, just that you're very comfortable being anti-SJW in a lot of your content.
What do you mean by anti-SJW? Because I'm pretty sure if you are anti-social justice, I would probably identify as an SJW. If I was anti-social justice, would that even qualify me as being part of the left? I feel like that's a pretty important hallmark of being a leftist.
I disagree entirely. I've been educating on this for years. I think one of my biggest talks about it was after Hassan first blew up. Me and him having a long conversation about how a leftist space being leftist does not mean minority or marginalized communities are welcome there at all. There's actually large creators as well as large communities of the left that couldn't care less and very highly stick to either harmful rhetoric for engagement, which is where I believe you're at, along with a lot of the current louder anti-SJW left, and then people like Peter Coffin, who engage in class reductionist ideology, both of which are very exclusionary to marginalized community members. Okay,
I can understand that, but I don't feel that falls in line with the idea of anti-SJW. When I think of anti-SJW, I think of my old shitlord days back in 2017, 2016. I was a teenager watching Chris Ray Gun and Sean Head. And I mean, if you saw my video talking about my political journey, you probably know where that went, right? Yep. When I think about people like this, I see them as people who are maybe economically on the left, but socially speaking, they could give less of not a single fuck about marginalize people because they reduce everything down to class. They're class reductionists, right? So I mean, we have Peter Coffin, who's been kind of being a bit class reductionist-y lately. I don't think we can disagree on that. I like he's or they, I think they them now. They've been defending this TERF named Kelly Zahos, which is pretty cringe. They've been burning her bus lately. I take issue with that. But I don't necessarily think that qualifies as anti-SJW.
I wouldn't put Bernie or Bust as qualifying as anti-SJW. I would put class reductionist as anti-SJW.
Well, yeah.
Anyone who clings to anti-SJW language and constantly uses the language of the oppressor in direct ignorance or refusal of the marginalized people speaking, I would say that person is too comfortable with the language of the oppressor and is using it in an oppressive manner, be it intentionally conscious or subconscious.
The problem is, every single example of an anti-SJW that I've seen has always been somebody who actively opposes the rights of these people, right? Most anti-SJW YouTubers, for example, are pretty transphobic, especially not NB-phobic, right? It doesn't really seem like I would call somebody an SJW if they have good intentions, they want to try to bring people over to the left, but they're utilizing problematic language to do so. It just seems like there may be we have a bit of a disagreement in methods of achieving the same goal, because anti-SJWs and leftists, progressive leftists, non-class reductionist types, have the same goals. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with the framing there.
I don't think I could agree that anyone literally using phrases coined by anti-SJWs, such as woke scold, could literally say they're not using anti-SJW rhetoric to promote their own rhetoric.
Are you a linguistic absolutist?
No, it's just using the language of the oppressor is still going to be harmful to the people that it oppressed when they were doing it. Just because you're using the same language to promote leftist ideas doesn't mean you're not causing the same harm with that language. Maybe not the exact same before you try and split hairs because the way I phrased that, but you're still at least not causing some level of harm. It's not all measurable as absolute worst or none at all. There is all of the different levels that fall in between.
Sure. So when I talk about things like this, I try to weigh the damage and the benefit, right? Because I care. I'm a consequentialist, right? So when we talk about ableism, when I would use ableist rhetoric, the argument that I always had in my head was, how much utility do I derive from engaging in ableist rhetoric and using that to bring people over, who may not be so receptive to sort of a softer, more a less offensive form of leftist rhetoric, and the people in my audience, or the people who may see me that aren't okay with ableism, that this rhetoric might hurt. So I had to weigh the ups and the downs, right? And when I talked to Corbidet, I thought he made a really good case for why I may be doing more harm with that ableist rhetoric than I'm doing good. So I was like, you know what? I'm probably going to cut down on the ableist rhetoric and not do that anymore, because I think it probably causes more harm than good. So there's that, but I don't necessarily think that if you are, but using a word like based, let's use based as an example. Based is a term coined by the alt-right, and now the left uses it just to mean whenever somebody says something that's based, something that's good that we agree with, right? Usually if it's a brave statement. I don't necessarily think that adopting the language of these groups is always bad. And even if it is, we kind of have to weigh the good and the bad and find out if it's doing more harm than it is good. Kind of like how I did with the ableist rhetoric.
I don't think that there's really a good analogy between co-opting based compared to co-opting slurs or anything that can be actually insulting, right? Whereas, I mean, I don't really call anyone based very much myself. I'm also not going to flame somebody for saying it, because you're not co-opting an insult or a slur. You're not comfortable with something used to demean and dehumanize people. It's more just the dumb descriptor that came out about someone who really knows what they're talking about and yada yada. That's just the way it goes.
Okay, so I didn't bring up based as necessarily a direct comparison to, for example, the R slur. I used it just as an example of a word that we've co-opted from reactionaries. So obviously based isn't nobody has used based as an attack against someone who's part of a marginalized group, right? I mean, not to my knowledge. I guess some reactionary might say, trans people are bad, and then a bunch of reactionaries will be based, but besides that, right, I mean, it's not a slur or anything like that. However, I do want to point out that how this affects certain people kind of changes depending on who they are, their experiences, what they're okay with, what their goals are. I know this is anecdotal, but I do personally know quite a few people who are part of marginalized groups that are fine with me using that ableist rhetoric. I've gotten a lot of people who said, I don't think you should stop using the ableist rhetoric, and I respond, I don't know, I think I may cause more harm than good doing that, and so I'm probably going to stop doing it. So it's not so much that one person who's part of this marginalized group can speak for all of the rest. You kind of have to feel it out in a way that you can't really get numbers for and say, is it reasonable to say that this is doing more harm than good? And if so, I should probably stop if my goal is to do good and not harm.
See, this is where we're always going to have some level of fundamental disagreement. The part I don't like about people who call themselves consequentialists is I don't think that ignoring the harm you do is okay because you think or feel or see that you do more good. Doing the good is good on its own and is inconsequential to the factor that you're still doing harm. And if you have a way to change or reshape said harm, it would be for the overall better.
Well, that's the thing, though. I don't necessarily care as much about like the philosophical or the I should say my like the pride behind doing what I believe is good. You know, like for example, let's say I was still standing by using like the R slur or something like that. Past me would have said, and let's assume that without a doubt, me using the R slur and engaging in ableist rhetoric results in a massive amount of people being pulled from the right and coming to the left and being like de-radicalized and sort of getting the edges smoothed out and all that. I mean, you know how the story works, right? Let's assume
I hear that excuse all the time, but I also get like emails, DMs, and tons of responses from people who were in the alt-right pipeline or previous Trump supporters, and even in some instances, actual like engaging in Nazi rhetoric and involvement that have seen my content and started to reconsider and rethink things. And I do that without calling anyone any slurs.
Sure. So a lot of people
that's just as anecdotal as people like you, Destiny, or Vosh saying that, like, oh, well, I reach so many people and it changes all of these things about it. But like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't accept that as like the end all be all, because plenty of other content creators who don't intentionally use harmful rhetoric have the same effect.
Yeah, sure. So I don't actually stand by that position anymore. That's why I said like old me would have said this, right? Yeah, and so
Okay,
some
fair,
people
yeah,
who are down the rabbit hole might come to your content and see what you have to say and be like, okay, yeah, I'll hear you out and actually maybe be de-radicalized by you. But I think you would agree with this. Most cisgender, heterosexual, white gamer boys online, hanging out on Twitch, hanging out on YouTube, they're watching their anti-SJW channels like the Quartering and No Bullshit and whatnot, aren't going to stumble across a stream by a trans woman and listen to a trans woman explain to them why they shouldn't hate trans people, right? There's sort of like a disconnect there where they don't respect trans people's identities in the first place. Chances are they aren't going to listen to a trans person explain why they should, right? That's why people like Destiny have been so effective in explaining like, hey, I'm a white gamer, bro. I'm very respected on Twitch. I've got a very long historied career of being like an esports guy, right? And hey, I can make a really good argument for why trans people and their identity should be respected, and I can do so in a way that is going to appeal to you. You know, with the whole like edgy, haha, gamer aesthetic, right? You know, sometimes I think he used to. I don't think he does it anymore, but he definitely used to engage in ableism. He even used to engage in like other types of problematic rhetoric back in the day. I don't think it's a good idea to discard that method because we do have to understand the people we're trying to reach aren't going to listen to somebody who's part of a marginalized community explain why that marginalized community deserves respect, generally speaking.
But so there's multiple levels that I can engage on this with, and I would actually like to touch base on multiples of them. And that is, A, no group is a monolith. I do actually get tons of people who come in for the worst and horrid wrong reasons that then stay. You probably don't know it about me because, as you said, you don't watch my content. I had my big blow up because I found Hassan Piker when he was no one on Twitch. I was a huge fan and follower, saw him tweet out one of the early links, got there when he had less than 10 viewers. He was horrible and had no idea what he was doing. I ended up being his first mod. I taught him how to use and create actual scenes and stream. He blew way up. He's put me in the Young Turks videos. He's pulled me on a dozen times. I've been featured on the Raj Patel with like 20,000 people watching. And for a year, I held pretty extreme numbers myself, doing this constantly, debating, educating, blood sports, every dark corner of the internet. And through that, I have seen hundreds and hundreds of people who do come in for those wrong reasons that end up staying because of listening to what I'm saying to some jackass who isn't going to have their mind changed at all in the conversation. But then furthermore, you have at least some level of a point. There is a large majority of people who won't want to hear it from someone like me, especially me. I'm a non-passing trans woman, and I don't hide that fact or like feel ashamed or sorry for it. So there is always that threshold that at some point has to be crossed. My problem is when people constantly claim themselves to be these champions that can do a great job fighting for trans rights and a great job reporting it, that then still constantly misspeak or say things that are harmful or that stroke subconscious, subtle, societally programmed biases that they're not even paying attention to because they don't see. At the end of the day, a cis person speaking for us is just usually going to end some level of bad because you can never actually empathize and fully understand the struggle most trans people go through. A cis person speaking with us and helping us and uplifting our voices or using their platform to try and get the right things across isn't bad. What's bad is when somebody keeps constantly making these major errors, but then anytime the trans community tries to say, hey, you're messing up, they're like, fuck you, my trans followers are fine with it. Woke, scold, block, and then makes a 20-minute video about angry cancel culture woke lits on Twitter, angry hate mobs.
Okay, so there's actually a few things I want to go over there. So first, you brought up that that I may be overlooking, or as I think I'm probably included in this example you gave, right? More or less.
From what I've seen, to some extent, yeah.
Okay, so you brought up that I may be overlooking some internalized biases or transphobic beliefs or attitudes. That's something I've never denied. I think that everybody, no matter how woke, has internalized bigotry and biases, but what makes you woke is the ability to recognize it, not pull like what the anti-SJW types do and say, oh, I'm not racist, I'm not bigoted, just because I have like, but why are you calling me racist? And freaking out about it and saying, yeah, you know what? Society has probably taught me a lot of these things. I probably have grown up with a lot of these ingrained biases and problematic ideas, but what makes the difference is that I acknowledge them and I try to do something about them. Now, the examples that you brought up of me engaging in problematic behavior, we'll get to that more in a minute because I don't necessarily agree that these things are problematic. And another thing I wanted to talk about was my audience, right? How you'll oftentimes call somebody out for this, and then that person will say, well, I've got a big trans audience, and like block you, right? Now, yep. Let's say I was Blair White, right? Blair White loves to use this example. Oh, I've got a big trans audience, and how can I be transphobic? I'm trans, and my trans audience likes me. How many trans... She always likes to bring up stories about how she'll go to some event, and she'll get a parent that goes up to her and says, thanks to your videos, I accept my trans daughter now. And that's well and good, right? But if we look at the actual material of what Blair White is saying, her rhetoric directly harms trans people. Doesn't matter that she's trans. Doesn't matter that her audience has a lot of trans people in it. It's what she says and does that actually matters. The problem is, with me as an example, I don't think what I say and do is harming trans people.
Just because you don't think it doesn't mean you're correct.
Okay, I mean, do you want to move on to like where you think I'm harming trans people?
If you want to, we can jump into the genital preference. It became the response to the debate that I made popular on Twitch that put me on Raj Patel. Literally, that defense came out of Destiny's mouth first in response to what I was saying.
Yeah, I was going to add too, if you guys are going to get too deep into the woods with language, we might have to ground our moral axioms or something to that effect. Well, just so we don't spend too much time on like the pedantry of like what do you think this means? What do you think this means? But if you're going to specific examples, that's pretty different.
Yeah, no, I thought we would go over some of the claims that she's made in regards to what she seems to be problematic about my rhetoric, and especially. I guess we can get into what you said in the tweet. Me talking about trans dating and genital preferences. You seem to take issue with my position on that, and I guess I'll characterize my position now. My position is that genital preferences in themselves are not transphobic. Now, they can contribute to a transphobic outlook on dating, but where I usually draw the line at where just general preferences and sexuality and transphobia begins is the essential idea that you don't see a trans person as the gender they identify as, right? If you see a trans woman with a penis and you don't see them as a woman, and that's why you don't want to date them, that is transphobic. But if you simply don't want to engage in sexual behavior with them because they just have genitals you're not cool with, that's a whole other situation. And I remember that the clip that kept going around showing me talking about ContraPoints, using her as an example, a lot of people took issue with this. It was really weird how they characterized it, because they would like attack ContraPoints by using a clip of me where they act like they're trying to defend It was really weird. But I used her as an example because I think it's safe to say I see her as a woman, right? I mean, she's a woman.
I don't know. Do you? That's where we're really going to get to breaking this down.
I mean, sociologically, biologically, and definitionally speaking, she's in every way a woman. It's how being a trans woman works. It's how being trans in general works. I mean, I don't say that trans women are women, or that trans people are valid as like to get, you know, pats on the back and stickers from my audience, right? I like to be correct about things.
And I would hope you don't.
All the research and data that I have at my disposal has brought me to the conclusion that trans people are valid as they identify the identity that they identify with. Sex and gender aren't the same. Sex is a bimodal distribution. Transgender people are valid. You know, I don't really do it out of some like. I'm not a demagogue, right? I'm not like Ben Shapiro, who will ignore all data or evidence that disproves my worldview and just sort of form an ideology, right? I try to form my opinions based on evidence and facts. So yes, I do think that ContraPoints is a woman. And the reason why I brought up Contra as an example is because I think it is safe to assume, based on the memes that she does on her channel, I think she literally sold merch that was called Mouthfeel, which is a reference to how it feels to have a trans woman's penis in your mouth. I think it's safe to say, especially because she's very open about her transition, that she probably still has a penis. And I said, you know, I think I said something along the lines of, I may not be interested in the relationship with ContraPoints, despite the fact I see her as a woman and think she's beautiful, because I'm not okay with penises in regards to sexual interactions, right? I don't necessarily think this is transphobic.
So there's still like multiple levels of this to get through. So first off, let's clarify just the super fast. There are different levels to transphobia, just like there's different levels to any bigotry, right? Saying you're transphobic doesn't mean you're going to go out and like harm a trans person to feel good about that. Just like saying you're doing something racist doesn't mean you're part of an active lynch mob. Like there's different varying levels to all of this. And usually when it comes to this conversation, you start to really pick at like those societally ingrained biases. And the reason I take issue with people so constantly jumping to this defense without any better or further explanation is because impact. It's not about the factor that you still see Contra as a woman, because at some level you do actually take an issue with it. And what that then portrays when not explained or worded properly actually brings on this whole issue of assumption, right? Like how many assumptions are in what you just said to me? There's actually a lot of assumptions in there. And those assumptions go on to feed pre-existing biases in the people that listen and the people that hear you say it, whether you intend to or even are actively thinking about the factor that it does. And my prime example for this would be, I don't think anyone here actually knows whether or not ContraPoints has a penis or not. We know she's previously made jokes about it, but then I haven't heard a direct reference to say that it is still there in quite a few videos. It could be, it might not be, we don't know. It's whatever with her transition, that's between her and whoever's going to see her naked.
Schrodinger's penis.
Right. The problem herein lies that it does lead to all of those assumptions, though, like the assumption that Contra still has a penis. I don't really want to use any specific person for examples. Just talking about trans people in general. The biggest problem that usually comes with this is you'll find people saying, well, I have a genital preference, so I'm not interested in dating a trans person. The actual way that I word this debate and started it ages ago is very simple. If you wouldn't date a trans person because they're trans, that is transphobic. And then everyone thought the ultimate cop-out to that is, well, I have a genital preference. Do you? Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what that implies to people that hear you say it that way. How do you identify? Can I ask? Like, I'm not trying to be like invasive here.
Yeah, two things I wanted to say really fast. I want to answer your question, just add a little caveat really quick. I'm straight. I believe. I mean, like, I guess I find femboys to be kind of cute, but I probably wouldn't do anything with them. But it's probably because, like, the femininity aspect. And also, I have said multiple times that trans women who have gotten bottom surgery, I would have no problem, like, engaging in a relationship with.
That right there says that you, at least at some like inherent level, don't fully see the trans woman as a woman that you'd be attracted to unless they can afford the surgery.
Well, no, it's because if I'm going to engage in sexual behavior with somebody, the genitals they have kind of does matter what I'm sort of aesthetically attracted to. It's not so much that
who's to say that like those genitals would even come up in that? Who's to say that's a permanent situation that would involve like a very long conversation between you and the potential partner?
Well, yeah, we're assuming here that like obviously it's possible that they could in the future end up getting like surgery. That's cool, but if I'm going to have sex with somebody, I'm pretty sure genitals are going to be involved.
That's absolutely inaccurate. You can very much tell you haven't interacted with a lot of trans people on that level. A 4-year-old just walked in the room, so I'm not trying to say the exact word right now. Hey, can we move her to playtime? Thank you. You can very much tell because I happen to interact pretty regularly with a lot more trans people than anyone that talks about them on the internet does.
Can we go in specifically? What do you mean by like sometimes sex with trans people doesn't have to involve their genitals?
It really absolutely doesn't. There are tons of trans women out there that would never want you to touch between their legs if they haven't had this the surgery, and it gives them gender dysphoria.
Oh, if it didn't involve that,
there could be all kinds of other sexual interactions that don't involve that.
And
there are some people who are very comfortable with that being involved. Like it's not a set monolith of the standard way that you would genuinely think about sex. It's absolutely not.
Sure, if there's no involving that, then I wouldn't take issue with it, right? Like if there's a trans woman that I think is attractive and I think she's cute, it wouldn't really matter what she has like between her legs if I'm making out with her, right? Like if that was where it went, then I wouldn't mind. I would still see her as a woman. It's just a matter of that particular part of her body I don't find particularly attractive. Same goes with cis women. I'm not into anal. I know my chat's gonna read their asses off. I'm not into anal.
They're gonna fuck you up for that one.
I don't like eating ass. I don't like doing anal. I think assholes are kind of gross. I stay as far away from as far away from as I can't speak as far away from them as I can. Maybe I do.
This might be the new debate now. I can't believe you just said that. Like, holy shit. I hope your chat's roasting you. You deserve it. Okay.
Doesn't matter if they're cis. Doesn't matter if they're trans. That's a part of the body. I just don't like going anywhere near. And I find it to be a similar situation in regards to the girl dick, right? Like, I'm not particularly attracted to penises. I find them gross. I find my own dick kind of gross, right? It's kind of big, but I still think it's pretty gross. Yeah, I don't want to go near a penis if I'm in a sexual situation, but that doesn't mean I don't see them as a woman, and I would still probably engage with them in any way if I found them attractive.
So you would actually engage in a relationship with a trans woman regardless of genitalia. See how much better that wording was? That's the point.
Sure, yeah.
It was just a matter of breaking it down.
Yeah, I mean, I still see them as a woman. I would still be attracted to them.
But what I'm saying is I don't ever actually expected you to have not seen trans women as women. I wasn't trying to portray that to you or give you any bad faith of that. Well, I hope I was pretty clear in that. Yeah, what I was trying to show is that there is a societally implicit bias that most people carry, and just loosely throwing these things out does reinforce that bias. It's the same way that scientific studies have showed us that using slurs, even when you're around people you don't think have that bias, reinforces that bias, and it actually causes impact later when they're actually like taking that knee-jerk reaction moment of hesitation or an offensive statement of their own or not trust towards that marginalized person because they're so used to hearing all of these slurs and biases reinforced in life.
Okay. I mean, it kind of seemed like the way you tweeted about me was saying Xanderhal talking about trans dating and his genital preference, saying dumb shit like we need white cis hets because no one would listen to SJWs. I mean, this sounds a bit strongly worded than you are here. I
try to match the energy that someone is giving me when we come into a conversation or a debate. I do what I do mostly out of the hopes of education, not internet fucking blood sports. Okay. This is what I do outside of Twitch too. Like I have a lot of credentials behind what I do when I'm not on the internet.
Okay, I just get really annoyed when people on Twitter are like really confrontational and like they make these really big call outs and I'm like, okay, you made some big claims. Are you down to defend that? And then like I'll bring them on.
I'm still sitting here defending them. I'm glad that we got
Well,
to
yeah,
a better wording on your thoughts on it. And I will still specifically state that you saying we need you is disqualifying. Like, that's not a good statement for anyone who's an actual ally. That's not how an ally works.
Well,
that's someone who wants the allyship sticker and to keep doing the things they want to do without actually learning to correct things.
All right, so I've never called myself an ally. I've been called an ally quite a bit. I don't think there's ever been like a clip of me saying I am an ally. I think it's kind of a cringe label, to be honest. But if people are calling me an ally and referring to me as an ally, do you think there's probably a reason for that?
I mean, you were the one who pulled up the exact context of the tweets, but it's you that literally said you need us, and you said it in the Corvidae debate. You may not have specifically used the word ally, but like that's specifically where you're aiming for, is that we need you to do this white knighting and this fighting for us. And
well,
that's about performative allyship at finest.
So you were talking about allies, saying you don't need white cis-het people to be speaking for you, and I said, hey, it's probably not a good idea to have right there, because there's a lot of people who are transphobic that aren't going to listen to trans people explain why trans people need rights. Sometimes you have to sort of use your privilege. That's what the point of being an ally is, I would assume, right? Using your privilege as a tool to help get rights for marginalized groups.
I'm pulling up the tweets myself now. You need allies if you want your movement to succeed. I effectively argue for the validity of trans allies. Nice id poll, though. You did specifically say that I need allies in reference to yourself. You did. Yes. Like,
I don't think I called myself an ally, but I guess the implication...
Then who are you referring to us needing in that? When it's me responding to me specifically adding you.
Bros?
But you're not calling yourself an ally in that? Because it definitely seems like you are. This seems like a really dumb thing to split.
I admit the implication is there, but I've been told a lot that I call myself an ally, and I don't feel like that's ever a label I've gone by. I guess it's more so that people just sort of refer to me as that because the context of what I say, right? A lot of my content is focused on like defending trans people, you know?
I definitely feel like that tweet is you categorizing yourself as an ally, and which, you know, cool, if you're going to be an ally, but weaponizing it to say you need us is not allyship. That's literally the exact opposite of allyship. We don't actually need allies anymore. We need accomplices. Like, if you're not in this fight with us, then you're basically almost at the point of standing against us at this point. And then if you're in this fight with us, what you should be focusing on is actually listening and learning to critique from trans people, not just assuming you already know and do all this good and you're going to make the best fight yourself. And you should always be trying to uplift those trans creators and those trans voices in your community. You should be influencing them to stream, to create their own content. You should be lifting up their videos and their voices when talking on trans issues instead of just your own ideas.
I'm pretty sure I do this.
You should normalize the idea that people can listen to those trans people about it, because this brings us right back around to the beginning, where at the end of the day, you are cis and you can never fully relate to everything. You can try to understand and you can do your best. That's not an insult, but there is a level that you will never fully understand and process.
Okay, so yeah, so for starters, I don't think that hold on a second. Somebody is adding me in another server. I gotta make the ping go away. My ADHD. No, so I actually want to get to the crux of what you think here. Do you think that referring to me as being like cis, white, het is really an argument against my credentials of talking about these issues?
Not about talking about them in general. I never insinuated as such. It's how you talk about them and whether or not you're willing to like work on the corrections and betterment, which I've seen your attempted apologies. And like the last one I watched was when you went for the statements against Essence of Thought. And then you were like, well, sorry, I guess I shouldn't have said that. I can diagnose that. And great job, chat. You made it to where I can't post this to YouTube, which isn't a fucking apology when someone critiques you. That's you blaming the people who critiqued you and then just canceling it and being pissed off.
Because what happened was I worded what I was saying very badly, and then my chat got really angry, and then I reworded it in a way that made sense, and they're like, oh, okay, we're cool now. And I was like, well, that looks pretty bad for YouTube now, right? But I just left the stream up as its own stream, because all we covered that stream. It didn't really feel worth making into a video. Also, I wanted to clarify here, or I wanted to actually go over this again. You didn't just say that, oh, maybe I need to, like, step back and let trans people be heard. Maybe if trans people are speaking out against me, I need to, the fact that I'm white and cis doesn't matter. You literally said, we don't need you to speak on our issues. You aren't equipped. You don't speak for communities you don't represent.
Yep, and if you go on to actually finish the entire tweet, I told you to go ahead and stay in your lane where you do work and talk to your de-radicalized people and stick to what you know. Because if you're not actually going...
Do you think stay in your lane means keep doing what I'm doing? Because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, what I'm saying is you don't speak for trans people, and my biggest contention is you acting like you do and speaking down to trans people when called out on issues and saying, well, I do so much for the trans community, I don't fucking have to listen to you, is essentially what it boils down to.
So what about, I actually want to bring up an example. Do you know of a, you probably don't because he's pretty small, but he actually made some waves a while back when he made a video on me and Vosh. His name is Transbra. Have you heard of him?
No, I have not. Okay,
so he's a trans guy, and he's like a big-time Ariel Scarcella, Blair White simp, just like turf light, like shrew scum type. And he made a video about me and Vosh and Destiny, and saying, why are these white gamer debate bros allowed to tell me, a trans man, that non-binary people are valid? What do they know about trans issues? They're white cis gamer guys. And obviously me and Vosh covered each video, and I covered it, and my argument was, for the most part, it doesn't necessarily matter what my identity is, doesn't matter what Transbra's identity is, what matters is what we're saying. What Transbra is saying unquestionably hurts trans people, and he's trying to use his identity as a shield, and my identity as an attack towards me and what I have to say, ignoring the arguments that we're making. And that's what I take issue with. You wouldn't go by the same logic if it was anybody else, if it was Blair White or Transbra making this argument. It's only because people you agree with are bringing up these issues that you are using this argument.
That's completely inaccurate. I tell trans people who don't speak well for the community and do harmful things not to all the time. I did a whole in-depth when Contra kept making fuck up after fuck up, especially after the fucking Buck Angel disaster piece. And I've literally called out every other fucking trans person that isn't actually speaking, because a lot of trans people go through this phase where we're having to self-educate and we're having to learn, because these topics aren't something you can easily find education on, and a lot of mistakes are made, and it's very easy to fall into to turf rhetoric. It's very easy to fall into trans medicalist rhetoric. It's very easy to fall into these negative ideals and images of trans people and then accidentally use and promote them in ways that are negatively impactful to other people. And I do absolutely call out those people as not knowing what the fuck they're talking about either.
Okay, but that's not the same.
It's not because they're cis, it's because they're fucking up. And if you weren't saying things and wording things in ways that were harmful, I probably wouldn't have actually added you on Twitter. I honestly didn't know a whole lot about you. I kept hearing other people talk about you, but then I keep looking and more controversies keep popping up. And then I go and I watch some of the videos from you and some of the videos of the people you're responding to. And it seems like everything starts like you and I are doing right now, right? You have this like good conversation and you talk about how your whole journey is you starting somewhere bad and reassessing your life, what you believed in your life thoughts and goals, and then trying to work to be better. But it all seems like now that you have a platform and an ego and your pride, all of that changing is behind you, because you'll have good, calm conversations when you're talking to someone, and then you'll completely just fucking ignore everything and forget everything. I wasn't really going to drive too hard on the ableism shit because you responded to Corvidae, and it seems like you actually want to take that shit out. But I'm not going to lie to you. No one who's actually like watching is sure you're going to do that on this side of the fence. I'm sure your viewers are hoping for the best. I'm sure everyone's hoping for the best, but no one's sure you're going to do it until you actually put the effort in at this point. Because
I mean, I've streamed like 4 times since I made that video, and I don't think I've engaged in any ableism at all. Like I've even avoided words that could even be construed as ableist. I mean, literally, I'm 20 years old. I was almost a high school dropout. I have 1 year of political experience. I've been doing this shit for 1 year. My political ideology, my thoughts about the world, the way I view the world, is going to evolve a shit ton. That's the only way I'm going to make it. Like even if we just look at it like consequentially, like as me wanting to be somebody on this platform, I'm not going to survive if I'm unwilling to change my opinions on things. I'm fucking 20. I'm going to look back at myself in 5 years and think I was a fucking idiot when I was 20 years old, right? If I'm unwilling to change my opinions on things and change my perspective, I'm never going to get anywhere doing what I'm doing. I'm not going to be an effective rhetorician. I'm not going to be an effective advocate for my beliefs. It's just not going to work. I'm going to be a bad creator. So obviously, if I go onto stream and I'm talking with Corvidae, and he makes a lot of good points about how my ableism might be harmful to a lot of people, I'm going to change my opinion on that after I've done like the required amount of thinking about it, and like, you know, sort of debating it in my head. And I did that, and I said, you know what? The ableism probably isn't going to do more good than it is going to do harm. And you actually brought up that, like, I'll have a conversation with somebody on stream, like what we're having now, and then later I'll go back on it, or later I'll walk back on some things like that. I don't think I've ever done this. I think the only example I can think of is the Corvidae thing, where originally I thought Corvidae was in good faith, but then the last few days he's been being like a complete like dick on Twitter for like, I think it's been like 2 days now, and saying things like, oh, I just want him on my stream to talk about ableism so I can extract free content from him. Like, that was pretty bad faith. I actually messaged him. I tried to say, hey, I heard you wanted to get into like debating reactionaries and stuff. I would like to message you, or I would like to talk with you and see if I can give you some advice and whatnot. And he's continued to act in like bad faith on Twitter and whatnot. I don't think he went to that conversation bad faith or in good faith. But regardless of that, I still think he made good points in regards to ableism. That's why I changed my position on it.
Just one quick interjection here for both of you. Neither of you are doing this, but I just want to put this out. If you're going to start talking about a lot of other people, it's totally fine if it's public stuff, but if it's private stuff, just try to avoid that. But I'm not saying either of you have done that. I'm just saying from here on out.
That's fine.
Sorry.
I like... Saying that makes it bad faith seems odd to me. That's the way that Corvidae has always been on Twitter, to my knowledge. I haven't seen them do anything I would classify as bad faith, and I think they actually handled that debate extremely well and way calmer than I expected from them. And y'all seem to make like good points, but then like you released the video reflecting on it and immediately started talking about how shitty they were pre-debate on Twitter instead of like actually sticking just to the context of the debate and how much that did or didn't affect.
So the reason why I talked about that in my stream reflecting on it is because I was reflecting on what happened. The reason why we were debating in the first place was Corvidae made a bunch of tweets about me, and a lot of them were very damning accusations, many of them involving drama that I assume the Serfs doesn't want platform, and that's fine because we're not talking about it, but have made some very damning accusations about me from their platform. And I was assuming when I was going to be getting on there and debating that those were the things we were going to be talking about, these like big claims that they had made about me. Like one tweet they had made about me was really short, and it talked about me engaging in ableist rhetoric. And then we get on there, and I'm prepping the stream, and I'm super ready, and then I start my stream, and then just before I start, Corvidae says, also, I'm not okay with talking about this drama that I tweeted like 18 times about. And I was like,
I would think that would be because we both know the drama you're talking about. I'm not going to pretend like I don't, and we're trying to be respectful of the wishes set. And it's not something I plan to engage with you with because I don't feel like I have all of the details or facts. I only know what little bit I know from back and forth of other
That's
people.
Fine. You haven't tweeted about it. You haven't made any statements about it. Use on your platform. Corvidae made like 8 tweets about it to their platform.
But my thoughts are now that the reason that they probably didn't want to go into that for that debate isn't them not wanting to go into that topic, because from what I understand, there's a few people that would love to go into that topic, but the other person involved have asked that doesn't happen. And I think that's more of a respect for that person than a disrespect or bad faith to you. I think that's why we've seen a lot of the tweet speed on that topic slow down, unless I'm mistaken and you're getting ads that I don't know about, which is holistically possible. I don't stalk your Twitter. So.
Well, no, because the person, I'm not going to get super into this, but I am working on a video right now because I have to. The other people involved with this drama, their lives are being negatively affected by the actions of this other person lying about them, and they're not happy about it. So they've decided it's time that they make a statement as well. So I'm going to let them speak on this issue because no one's going to believe me because it's going to be he said, she said. But if it's she said, he said, she, and she said, then that'll change things. So that's where I'm going to leave it. But the issue is, and without talking about the drama itself, what Corvidae did was make these massive claims on their platform. They were completely happy making these indefensible claims because, yes, I can absolutely destroy these claims that they made against me on Twitter. I have screenshots and evidence to back it all up. against me. And then once we got on stream, they wanted to laser focus on the ableism stuff, which is probably the weakest subject. And then after being super toxic on Twitter, they behave super cordially and very optically good on stream, and they're unwilling to talk about this massive claim that they had made against me on Twitter, and were only willing to talk about the thing that made them look good. That's why I look back on that thinking they probably weren't in the best faith, especially seeing how they've been acting on Twitter these last few days, and the fact that on stream they were like, yeah, I'm down to talk with you in private or whatever about like getting into debating or about ableism and like your rhetoric and whatnot, and then I messaged them and they left me on red and then started shit-talking me on Twitter. So yeah.
So without talking to them or even like actually looking into this deeper, I said that's probably what it is. And Corviday's in chat literally saying, oh my God, that's exactly right. Yes. And the reason I know that is because other people have said, don't touch this topic. And I have DMs of that person saying that they don't want to, not from that person, just knowledge that they exist. So, I mean, if you're making a video on it, I guess it's your content, your choice, but I feel like that's probably going to stir a pot you don't want to stir.
Well, no, I'm not going to get into specifics, but the person involved has been purposefully trying to signal boost the drama and has admitted that they are trying to make money off of it. Like, they've been tweeting things like, Xanderhal will buy me a house no matter what, and I'm going to, like, get a streaming career off of this. I've been taking screenshots of it as well. I'll be making a video about it soon, so anybody who's curious about it can just wait for that. It won't just be me, it'll also be everybody else, every single other person who is involved with this speaking on it as well, because they are not happy about what she's been doing. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because I imagine the Serfs doesn't really...
Well, I was going to say, why don't we
redirect
redirect this a little bit towards you two, right? Because it's stuff that you two can talk about, or at least bigger issues, but if we talk about, like, I don't know, third-party drama, I think we'll just get stuck in the weeds a whole bunch.
Okay.
I mean, I can definitely touch on some different third-party stuff and not go into dragging in the third party. I more want to react to like your approach to it. I assume you did at least some kind of research. As you said, you hadn't really heard of me. I hope you would assume that I at least did a little bit because I knew who you were, but hadn't actively been following. The armchair diagnose thing, I feel like you just swept that away pretty quick because you felt like it was a bad portray. Your defense of it is what really drove me up the wall, and I haven't seen anyone else actually respond accurately. Do you actually think the cycle of abuse from 1979 is the most realistic way to go about judging whether or not abuse victims abuse somebody? Because you're the only person still using that model if you think that.
No, I don't think I stand by anything that I said there, besides the idea that it's certainly possible, and I assume possibly even likely, that if you are abused, those ideas and those behaviors might be normalized in your life, and you may replicate the same behavior. I don't think this is like an outdated thought process, but the reason why I took it back was because it was armchair psychology. I don't feel comfortable diagnosing someone like Essence of Thought, who I will stand by every other issue I have with them. I certainly think they're a terrible person. But I don't know.
I mean, I could pull out my DSM-5 and a bunch of other references, and we could have some real conversations about this at some point if you want. But if you actually think that being abused cycles you into most likely being an abuser, you have horrendous thoughts on that, and you are not authoritative on the subject.
I didn't say it most likely did. I took back what I said about that because I didn't feel that I could authoritatively.
You just said that if somebody is abused, it normalizes those behaviors.
All I know is that people who are abusive, from what I've seen, at least with data, I may be wrong, tend to have been abused earlier in their lives. However, I may be wrong, and there's a reason why I retracted that statement, because I didn't feel I could authoritatively speak on that issue. It's not a hill I want to die on. I don't really care about it that much. That was months ago, and I decided to leave that behind because I thought it probably wasn't a good thing to say.
I don't know any other specific topics you want to bring up. I feel like we've conquered the ones that we definitely highly specifically focused on in our Twitter interaction.
I mean, you tweeted a few more times about me. This was just the first tweet.
I stopped tweeting directly at you like I would normally do with anyone, but specifically like I do when someone just tries to quote tweet one part of a thread to get just that context and create a new narrative for their fan base to interact with and get excited about, specifically leaving out everything else to it and only responding to that part like it's the only part that matters, because I feel like quote tweeting someone instead of just having one long conscious thread is a gotcha attempt to look fucking good for the public and the Bloodsport side instead of actually engaging.
I don't debate on Twitter. I think Twitter discourse is cancer, and every time I've ever gotten into it, I would oftentimes end up getting like dogpiled, and eventually I'd get like banned off of Twitter or something like that. So for at least the last 6 months, my philosophy has been, if you're unwilling to come on and debate, which props to you, you were, I'm just gonna like quote tweet you and say, and then like drop like a meme or something like that. I'll drop like a Keck W if it's something I think is funny, or I might do like the most recent meme. Like for you, I did "Don't care, didn't ask," plus you're white because that's a spicy meme right now.
It's a fucked up meme, but yeah.
No, it's a spicy one. I love it. But I mean, we can go into some of like you vague tweeted about me like a few other times. You can go over what you said there if you want.
You can feel free. Here's my standard of this. I don't back down from the possibility of debate, engagement, discussion, or education. If I say, tweet, or post something anywhere on the internet, I am willing to defend it or be taught that I'm wrong on it and reevaluate and make my own fucking statement after. Like, I'm completely open to anything I say being scrutinized because that's just the way the fucking internet should work. If you're gonna say it, you should be willing to stand behind it.
Same. All right, so I this one is like one I don't take very big issue with, but I'm pretty sure it's like a reference to me and like the general community that I'm a part of. For everyone who forgot, Benny Boy Shapiro popularized the term woke scold and its anti-SJW in origin, hence why I don't call the dirtbag left, I call them the anti-SJW left. Then you put an image of a dictionary or a Urban Dictionary post of woke scold and the definition that comes from Ben Shapiro. Noun, a person who is woke and scolds others who are not. Verb, the act of scolding in the name of wokeness. Be extra careful when you talk about feminists, liberals, or anyone else in the DSA to avoid experiencing the wrath of the woke scold. Now, I guess I'll give my take on this. When I use the term woke scold, I don't think I'm using it the same way Ben Shapiro does. I don't think my community does either. I mean, I am in a place and in a community, I harbor a community that very much values the idea of being woke. When someone like me or Vosh refers to a woke scold, we're talking about people who are part of the left that relentlessly attack other people on the left for any reason, but generally use a guise of wokeness as a reason to do it. I've sort of evolved my definition a bit. I see a lot of the people that sort of embody this definition also engage in really abusive, gaslighty behavior. Do you know who No Comment Chick is?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I was actually on her stream the other day, and it was really, really nice. She's super cool. But her chat, her chat though was super toxic, engaging in what I don't think you would feel comfortable but defending abusive behavior. And a lot of these people I recognize from Twitter. I mean, you have like the one lady that accused Peter Coffin of being a pedophile on Twitter. That caused like a ton of drama a few months back. Like just people who are engaging in full-on abusive behavior, but they use a veil of wokeness, I guess, as a shield for that. And that's who I'm referring to when I talk about woke scolds. I think Vosh would agree with this definition as well. But when Ben Shapiro is talking about the woke scold, he's talking about people who maybe don't like calling trans people the T-slur, or, you know, maybe don't like that black people are being killed by police in the street, things like that, right? There's a very different definition being used here, and I'm not a linguistic absolutist. I think when different people use a different word and make it clear that the definition they're using is very different, that word sort of changes in its meaning.
No, I completely disagree, honestly. I think if you're that comfortable with the language of the oppressor, you're comfortable with some level of oppression, be it subconscious or conscious. And I think that there's a rift drawing in the left, and there are a bunch of high and mighty content creators who are trying to cut out marginalized voices that disagree with them by always lumping them in as the cancel culture, the angry Twitter hate mob, and the woke scolds. Or the ooh-woo cat girls now, and anime profile pics. The same things that anti-SJWs railed against the left for ages. It's just now the new anti-SJW or dirtbag left is very okay with just ignoring or cutting out those voices, and it's going to continue to draw a bigger rift that's going to separate the actual community further.
Okay, so I think you actually are a linguistic absolutist, because it seems like you're still saying this is the language of the oppressor. You're arguing against the idea of changing. Okay, so do you admit that you're a linguistic absolutist? It's not like
no, definitions can change over time. The problem with this is the opposite side is still using it to mean this exact thing. Like, you haven't changed the overall definition. You just think you're using it differently. And like calling it the language of the oppressor. relays back to an older argument that has existed since like first generation white nationalism. I don't know how much you know and have experienced with like first gen white nationalism compared to what we now see as like neo-Nazi or alt-right or online white nationalism that's in its massive boom state.
I mean, I can't even legally drink yet, so I probably am not very familiar with first generation white nationalism.
I grew up in a very abusive household raised by white nationalists that still went to Klan rallies. I'm very familiar with first gen white nationalists. It's terrifying. It's the worst, horrible thing in the world. And the the language of the oppressor predates to back then, because they would use the excuse to try and seem woke or okay talking about it, because when they use the N-word, they're not talking about black people. There's a difference between black people and the N slur. And it's like the same idea that was used to combat that. The language of the oppressor cannot actually be used without still harming the people that it oppresses. The problem isn't just language in general, it's specifically using harmful rhetoric created to marginalize, condemn, or condescend an entire group or multiple groups in this instance. That is the difference. I don't have the same fucking issue with based, right? I don't have the same issue that the definition of bisexual changed over the years. I don't have the same like definitional issue with so many things changing and evolving to understand time, because language evolves. My problem, however, is when you're using harmful language.
Sure. So let's use an example that is directly comparable here. How about queer? That is a term that has been co-opted, or I should say reclaimed. I don't know if it was ever originally part of the LGBT community before. I may be wrong. But it's been reclaimed by that community, but the oppressor still uses it as a slur. It's just the context in which it's used is what makes the difference. Do you disagree with that word's usage in terms of the LGBT community?
So now you get into the idea of reclaiming slurs, and my problem with that is it's a very complicated and nuanced thing that individual members of marginalized communities have to weigh and choose themselves. Where queer is now used as like a proud identity, black people will use the N-word as like formal and nonchalant with each other, and multiple other examples throughout. Like the reclamation of a slur within the marginalized community is very different from people not inside the marginalized community using harmful language. And this harmful language wasn't just to one marginalized community, it was to condescend anyone with a different thought pattern. I don't know if you could fully try and attempt to reclaim it. It could be possible somewhere down the line. I would still take some kind of apprehension with it. But at the same time, probably wouldn't be as drastic if the general overall thought and use of it fit something that was actually accurate. My biggest problem is I'm constantly called a woke scold when I don't actively call for the cancellation of people. I don't actively harass and at fucking tons of people on Twitter. If you go and scroll through a lot of my Twitter history, you'll see me at you. You'll see me quote tweet Peter Coffin. But outside of those like really big current events, I don't actually at someone. When I had problems and critiques with Contra, I never once added, emailed, or DM'd her. And I've literally spoken with her multiple times after holding the charity events and producing the charity events for fucking Philosophy Tube. I've had the opportunity to rail at her directly, but I understand that she's getting tons of fucking hate. And if you're not approaching it as actual critique, there's not a fucking reason to try and put actual critique in the conversation. That's the difference, is woke scold still isn't even being used to actually mean something useful and tangible. It's being used to marginalize and separate groups.
Okay.
Even by you leftists.
Okay, so there's two issues that I take with that. So first, the original... So technically, we are reclaiming the term woke scold, right? Because if I talk to Ben Shapiro right now, I am 99.9% sure Ben Shapiro wouldn't be able to help himself from calling me a woke scold. Because by his definition, I am absolutely a woke scold, right? This is a derogatory term used towards me, would be used towards you, because we're both lefties, we're both progressive, right? So if I'm using this term, if the lefty community in general is taking this term and using it to refer to a group that I think most people, at least within my audience, would agree are certainly counterproductive to the growth and the success of the left. I don't really see this as a word being used to silence minority people or marginalized people within the left. I would also like to point out that a lot of the people that I see on Twitter that I've called woke scolds are not part of any marginalized group. Some of them are like white, cis, heterosexual people that just don't like me for some reason, want an excuse to attack me by saying I'm not, I'm not pure enough for them. Like, I don't think that this is in any way comparable to the language of the oppressor in regards to, the reactionary shit, like slurs and whatnot. Unless, like, you think woke skull is a slur towards progressive people. In which case, we're reclaiming it. We're taking it back.
I don't think you get to reclaim it because you're not claiming it and wearing it as a badge of honor or enjoying it or accepting it or using it as a self-descriptor. You're trying to reframe it to mean the people that disagree with you.
They don't particularly disagree with me, actually. I think the average person I would call a woke scold, if we like laid out all of our opinions on the table, we'd agree on everything. It's the way that they act and the way that they behave and the engagement that they or the way they engage is the reason why they get that label, generally speaking.
But that's the thing. Like, it's ascribed to tons of fucking people who don't engage in the way that you describe woke scolds. Especially a fuck ton of trans people and any trans person that doesn't show their own fucking face on Twitter.
I mean, I guess people that like at me and say that I'm like a piece of shit, go like, you know, yeah, whatever. That say that they're like cis and have their pronouns in their bio may be lying about it, but I'm pretty sure that this isn't directed at like a particular marginalized group or generally marginalized people.
You might not be intentionally using it for just that. You may not. I'm not going to describe that.
I completely understand what you're about to say. Let me continue. In fact, I think the majority of marginalized people would not come anywhere near the definition of woke scold that I use. I think it's a very small minority of people within the left, regardless of their identity, that are engaging in this behavior. I think they're problematic for the left, and that's why I think it's worth giving them a label and talking about how we confront this issue. I mean, I think some of them may be good faith and may be able to have their minds changed. However, I think many others aren't particularly in good faith, or maybe just trying to find an outlet for their abusive behavior, and they're using a guise of, you are not progressive enough, you aren't able to speak for us, as a way of sort of venting their abusive behavior, because they tend to act
you calling it abusive behavior just sounds so much like fucking tone police.
We can't keep talking over each other, so let one person finish, and then
I thought he was done there. Okay. I was trying to
I thought that was your
innocence. My bad. But yeah, you literally calling it a vent for abusive behavior literally sounds exactly like fucking tone policing. Do you expect people who are being like attacked or fucking categorized or fucking ignored or fucking shit talked to always just come in like, please sir, could you maybe stop being a dick to me and listen to my positive critique? Because that doesn't actually fucking work on modern day and age, especially not on fucking Twitter. And beyond that, like, you can't expect like fucking marginalized or irritated or fucking upset people to always just like be the most fucking happy-go-lucky, you know, fucking poly-positive. Like, it's not a goddamn thing.
Okay, so I do not do respectability politics. I don't advocate for it. I promise you that I am probably one of the least in favor of respectability politics you can imagine. I fucking love it. Actually, I'm not going to give my opinion on the riots happening right now because Lance is streaming this on Twitch and I'm streaming this on YouTube, and I'd rather not get in trouble. But I do not like respectability politics. I do not expect people who are part of a marginalized community that are facing oppression to just say, oh, okay, well, hey, can we... And be like super respectable, right? I think it's completely valid that they may engage in ways that are not particularly good optically, or maybe not like the most rational way to go about things. But I don't think it excuses abusive behavior, gaslighting, and like harassing people. I don't think, especially people, well, particularly people who most certainly are not what these people claim they are. Like ContraPoints, for example. I don't think like bullying ContraPoints until she was so depressed she took back up into being an alcoholic. I don't think that's excused by any like wrongdoing ContraPoints might have done.
No, but I also think constantly hiding behind just saying woke scolds took issue with it prevent any actual idea of critique. Do you know how many times I was called a fucking woke scold for saying that Contra made serious fucking mistakes without ever fucking throwing them directly at her? Just talking to my community and anyone who happened in. Do you know how many fucking times it was levied and thrown at me? The same to anyone else who actually fucking said anything. Even though some of those videos, like Corvidae and Lex, that fucking Contra herself then put in her next video and said, if you want to hear some actual critique of me, go check these out. Like, but those are two out of like hundreds of actual critiques that were levied, but instead of actually having a chance to give that critique to someone who's making a fucking mistake, you get literally chumped in with a fucking angry Twitter hate mob and part of fucking cancel culture. Instead of actually being able to have a fucking conversation. And do you not then realize how much that's going to piss people off and then just continue to fuel that fire?
No, I completely understand that. And I don't speak for anybody but myself, but what I will say is that if you have a massive group of people going after somebody with and I don't think you would deny this, a lot of abusive behavior. Do you think that a lot of the shit that ContraPoints was getting was absolutely abusive?
There was definitely some points of abusive reactions. Anyone that engaged in doxing, I'm sure that there were some like abusive things, but I would not categorize most or predominantly all of it as abusive, because a lot of what I saw were people trying to say, hey, that's not okay. That's actually really hurtful. Why would you say something like that? And then 100 Contra stans replying to that with how fucking dare you, because stan culture has gone too far.
Okay. I don't give a fuck about stan culture or cancel culture. I think they're cringe terms. I don't think that there's like this huge cancel culture that's out to get everybody. Okay, I don't care about that, right? But what I'm talking about is there was a significant amount of people, at least enough so to very much distressed ContraPoints, that were going after her with abusive attacks. It was doxing. There are people trying to gaslight her. There are people going after her friends. Like, I think this is very bad behavior. And when you have a large amount of people going after someone like that, and then you are somebody who may want to come out and say, hey, I think I have some reasonable criticisms of ContraPoints, you have to be very careful in the way that you do so, because you may blend into the crowd of abusers, right? And I don't think it's unreasonable to think that if somebody is the victim of that kind of behavior, they may see another constructive criticism and think, okay, that's probably just another one of the abusers, right? In fact, I know I was able to do this successfully. I made a video criticizing ContraPoints, in which I said, I think she's disconnected from the younger trans community. I think she, the way in which she makes her content is not conducive to directing a message that can't be taken in the wrong way. I think that the way she does like characters and whatnot resulted in a lot of this drama, because it wasn't just her explaining her beliefs. A lot of people would interpret the character of Tiffany Tumbles as an example of her actual beliefs, and I think that was one of the hugest problems. I made a video in which I criticized ContraPoints in good faith, and I did it well put together, and I didn't get any hate for it. Not a little bit. And I read all my comments. The video has like 25,000 views, not a single hate comment, and most of them were ContraPoints fans saying, yeah, you know what, I really like ContraPoints, but I completely agree with this. I think some of the things she has done are problematic. I do think she can improve in these ways, but guess what? It didn't come off as abusive, and ContraPoints followed me shortly after that, and we've talked a little bit, and ContraPoints thinks I'm cool. I don't think it's a matter of, oh, just because you criticize ContraPoints, you're going to be made out to be an abuser, so much as it is in the way that you present this message. I'm not advocating for respectability politics. What I'm saying is having an issue with somebody and believing that issue is based in, does not excuse abusive behavior.
But then throwing around this term that's been used as an attack, using it again as an attack, and then lumping in tons of people that don't fit your own definition of it is fucking problematic from the entire group that uses it the same way that you do. Because that's what's actually fucking happening to a shit ton of trans people. You can go check my Twitter. I'm about to hit 2,000 followers. It's nothing too fucking fancy. But considering where I was 2 years ago, I like to think it's pretty big, right? And then if you actually go through my followers and you learn that the massive majority of them are fucking trans, and then you actually go back to that timeline and you see when shit happened and what they were saying about it, they're all getting the same slander and hate that I was and that everyone else who actually said something, even without adding ContraPoints. People were just searching ContraPoints on Twitter and reacting to anything. Like the same toxicity is coming from the side that you're swearing is against the toxic abuse. Like it's the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, I'm not defending Contra stans here. Who will go after anybody that criticizes the Queen.
Well, it's not
right?
just Contra. We're using Contra as like the primary like example right now. But don't just subscribe it to just Contra, right? Like fucking. I knew Peter Coffin. We've worked together on this very show as well as over on many of my fucking charity events. I tweeted out that him saying transphobe rights was a yikes take, and he fucking insta-blocked me. He was following me, and we've worked together and talked multiple. They were following me, and we've worked together and talked multiple times. And instantly, and that continues to happen with all kinds of major content creators that refuse to take any kind of critique or criticism.
Hey, listen, I got problems with Peter Coffin lately. I want to save that for if I have a conversation with him. Okay, I'm just
saying this goes to like all kinds of high up content creators. It's not about naming one or two. There's this huge disconnect from the ability to actually take any fucking critique.
Well, that's the problem, though, right? As a public figure, and I understand that there is a lot of responsibility that you are undoubtedly going to have to incur as a public figure. You've got tons of eyes on you, right? This is going to happen. You kind of do have to accept that if you're going to be a public figure. Regardless, doesn't matter how many subscribers you have, it doesn't matter how much responsibility you have or how famous you are still a person with human emotions. And if you are incurring the wrath of a lot of people online, you're undoubtedly going to lump in people who are maybe presenting some good constructive criticisms with those who are engaging in straight up abusive harasser behavior. It's just going to happen. And you can criticize that person for that or criticize the people doing that, but I don't think it's fair to, it just seems like you're trying to excuse the abusive behavior of many of the people who are going after Contra. And I don't think that you're like an abuse apologist or anything, I want to clarify, but it does seem like that's what's happening.
That's my problem then, right? Is because then the same a different version of abuse comes right from the opposite side using this fucking harmful language to just dismiss and ignore huge waves of marginalized communities. Literally, the people that were tweeting about my exact field were instant blocking me. The person who started the whole thing, Kelly Zaus, I'd never even heard of her. And I went to her Twitter to continue reading the thread after being blocked elsewhere and was already blocked on her thread. No idea who she was, had never added her in my life.
She
but
seems
because
like
the other person blocked me, boom, insta-blocked. Like, that's what I'm saying is, like, this keeps happening, and specifically when you're in the trans community, the people who, like, use, defend, and ignore this, like, harm coming from the stuff that they're so proud of using and think is okay and funny, constantly ignores and pushes us to the side, whereas we're constantly being silenced. And that's a fucking problem that is coming unintentionally from what I refer to as the anti-SJW left, because whether the intent is there or not, the impact is there.
What do you mean by, like, us? Are you talking about, like, a particular community or, like, a group of people?
Mainly, like, the trans community is what I mean there.
But I do not think nearly the majority or even, like, a significant amount of the trans community really would agree with this group that is, like, super critical of Contra.
I know a fuck ton of divide exists on this. There are a fuck ton of trans people who do take issue and a fuck ton of trans people who don't take issue, which is its own sentiment to the factor that we have this huge issue around trans language and education. And there are these constant divides, and there are people who have these different thought patterns and pre-existing biases towards this or that make us constantly butt heads, which is why it's not monolithic but the use of things like woke scold and all of that is more negatively impacting communities like trans community, is my point.
Do you think it's probably more likely because the people who we call woke scolds are on the left, and the left is more inclusive to marginalized groups, and so you have a higher chance of somebody who is on the left being part of, you know, some marginalized group, and that's probably why it's more of a just a demographic statistical thing rather than a targeted attack?
No, I don't think as many cis het and white content creators are being blocked or removed and unable to engage in the conversation. As literal, like example, anecdotal evidence, I know, but as literal example, the Serfs and I retweeted that same Twitter thread at the same time with very milquetoast responses, and Lance went on to have a full conversation about it, and to my knowledge, still isn't blocked. I was blocked instantly, within seconds.
If we want to talk about blocking, I think that's probably one of the go-to things that, like, who I would call woke scolds like to do. They'll talk about you very negatively behind a block, right? Lance even told me, like, a couple days ago, and you can back this up if you want, that you can't follow me because you'll get on too many block lists. And he won't notice that.
That's what I told you. As well as like 6 or 7 other people. I was blocked by Lindsay Ellis, and I couldn't figure out why. So I unfollowed like 6 or 7 people that other people recommended me to unfollow, and then I stopped being auto-blocked by Lindsay.
Yeah, so I don't think necessarily that this, like, whole blocking people who disagree with you thing is endemic to specifically the anti-SJW left. I would actually say that it's way more common on, like, the woke scold left, as I say, right? And that's fine. I think blocking people is warranted if you don't.
I believe that when people have a reason to block people, it's fine. I believe content creators blocking anyone that critiques them, even in the most calm milquetoast ways, is them avoiding any level of conversation or critique. I was harsher in my tweet at you, and we're sitting here having a debate, than the person I was literally friends with. That's the difference. Like, that's the problem. So whereas you didn't personally engage in this, you don't see it as a problem, but I promise you that problem does exist.
Wait, I absolutely see it as a problem.
What I was going to say is this is something we don't have like empirical data on, so we can't ever say like, you know, does X crowd do more than, you know, Z crowd or something. So it might be like something we could pivot away into. I don't know. You guys were on a really productive line right before we got into the blocking.
Yeah, before it really like spiraled into just the blocking aspect of it. That all just goes into the same like category of it for me, though, to like try and make it back into the bigger. I think a lot of people are using woke scold and that separation of the different group to stop taking any critique from anyone that's actively just trying to give them critique. I think it is just being used as a shield to stop all that, which is one of my biggest contentions with it.
Well, since we can only really talk in anecdotes on this issue, do you think it's unusual that ContraPoints like followed me shortly after seeing my video in which I gave her a constructive criticism about how she could like improve her content and improve her her rhetoric and maybe avoid harming the people that find that her actions hurt them?
I would have to watch your video to give, and I will now that I know you did one, just out of curiosity. I'm going to go watch it. But I would probably have to actually watch it to really be able to give a thought, because I'd have to know where was your critique aimed compared to where like other people, specifically where I'm always focusing the trans community's critique aimed. Because a lot of mine, right, was promoting that fucking transphobic ideology, that trans medicalist ideology, especially that comes with still referring to Buck Angel as an activist, which is just horrifying. And
I think Buck Angel probably would still qualify as an activist, but not a good one.
He literally made a pyramid scheme specifically designed to rob trans people after getting their hopes up that it would end up paying for their surgeries. The dude is like a criminal abuser.
Me, I know all the shit he's done. But believe me, I hate Buck Angel. I'm not going to defend him.
Whole rabbit hole. Holy!
It just seems like so. One of the main criticisms, and if you want to watch my video, it's called like a fair constructive criticism of ContraPoints, I think. And the main criticism that I said was that I feel ContraPoints, you know, she's a bit older, she's kind of a boomer, you know, is that she feels very disconnected, or just is very disconnected from the younger trans community, which is inarguably way more progressive than the older trans community. There's a lot of trans medicalism and a lot of TERF-esque rhetoric in the older trans community. They like to be very stealth, generally speaking. They aren't like proud to be trans like a lot of the younger trans community are, at least from my observation, right? I obviously can't speak as certainly on this, but this just seems to be from my observation, right? So I take issue with ContraPoints and her characterization of a lot of issues, because she seems to be looking at it from a much older lens. And don't get me wrong, there are still older trans people who don't look at the world this way, but that was why I criticized Contra. And people seem to look at that criticism, both people who are critical of her and people who are fans of her, and her herself seem to have thought that was a fair criticism.
So I hate this defense. This is what I when it comes to this conversation, I should just coin the Contra defense. And I take like personal issue with it, probably because I'm 31. I am literally the same age as Contra. I turned 31 in a month. Okay. I am on the board. We actually call it a steering committee because we restructured it to avoid unjust power hierarchies. But I'm on the steering committee of the largest state-level trans-led nonprofit in the United States. I have been actively with them for several years now. I volunteer all across our entire state, as well as help trans people now on an international basis, as I'm viewed in 32 fucking countries. And we've literally helped people in transphobic countries seek asylum elsewhere. I literally interact with trans people on the day-to-day IRL, and was for years before I started Twitch, and do it every day through Twitch. And one of my big key things is working hand in hand with Sage. If you don't know what that is, it's an elderly LGBTQ specific group. And we run elders groups ourselves as an organization. And out of the literal up to probably close to 1,000 of people I have talked to who are so much older than Contra, none of them would make that same fucking statement.
Okay, so I don't feel comfortable going off of that with anecdote. I guess I did as well, but it just
I know a lot of people are, but yeah, you used anecdote as well, and I know a lot of people have.
Yeah, and I said that there are probably a lot of older trans people who may not fall into that line of thinking, but I'd like to point out that me explaining why I think she engages in that behavior and the reasoning and why she should probably stop because it's harmful. I mean, that was the point of me critiquing her, right? Isn't an excuse or a defense for her. That's just me speculating on why I think she engages in that. The whole point of my video was this is a bad thing and she should stop.
I will absolutely give you props where that is. That's a better take than most people do, who act like that's just like this great glorifying shield. And she kind of presented it as this like be all explanation when she commented on it in a video, and I couldn't fucking stand it. I personally fucking couldn't stand it, as well as everything I've seen on the actual systemic working with side of it argues with that entirely.
Okay, I would also like to point out with the example that you gave up, you worked with a lot of activists within the trans community. I would imagine that.
Oh no, we're a peer-to-peer. We're a peer-to-peer support. We don't do political as our nonprofit. Well, we offer peer-to-peer support to individuals. So you're like part of sort of like a network, right? I also, we actually literally call it Main Trans Network, yeah. But
okay, so we're talking about people who are trans that are way more likely to be down to interact with other people and talk about like what they're dealing with, rather than people who are more likely to be stealth about it. Because it seems like the people I'm referring to are trans people who aren't like proud to be trans, but more so want to remain stealth and just sort of do their own thing. That seems to be the phenomenon.
Members that fit both
sure, but we're talking. There's going to be a bias there because of the group that you're the group that we're selecting for, right? It seems like there's a lot less pride within the trans community, the older trans community, than there is in the younger one. I'm not saying it wasn't there, but there seems to be a disconnect between generations, which is true of cis people as well, or even of the LGBT community. It's like gay people. Rather than just trans people. This just seems to be common. Like older generations seem to be different than the younger ones in regards to how progressive they are, how like proud they are in the way they behave. I don't think this is like a super hot take.
I would absolutely disagree with you based on personal experience. Again, like I've literally helped 69-year-old veterans, one that I'm actually very close with and I go and check on regularly. She lives downtown, who's been out and fucking proud and has zero regrets and is very non-passing, still walking down the street in a fucking dress with a walker and a service dog and no fucking apology. Like, and that's only one example of literal hundreds and hundreds that I see and work with on a regular basis. And to me, and from everything I see, there's this idea that that's what's happening, right? There's this idea that that's what it was, because for a while being stealth meant staying alive. But there has always been a large, unapologetic, and comfortable community that doesn't pass because we can't.
Okay, so I'm not... okay, so...
And that's not just in my age group. That's 30 years ago.
Okay, that's completely cool, and I acknowledge the existence of people like that, and I don't think this is necessarily a good thing. I don't think this excuses the like the trans-medicalist rhetoric or this behavior, right? The ashamed to be trans thing. However, it does seem, at least from the data that I've seen, Generation Z is more progressive than the generation before it, millennials. Millennials are more, like, progressive than the boomers, right? This seems to be the phenomenon, and I don't feel like trans people are an exception to that.
The way that the generation is accepting of or okay with us doesn't change the factor that there have always been large numbers of both sides of this coin. It's not just that generation wants to stealth. It's actually there was the same argument then, and it's always been, and it probably always will be in fucking 20, 30 years. People are going to say that my generation stealth. I'm in the same generation as Contra, and I don't at all feel like my generation has that mindset she claims we have. Like, well, that's what I'm saying, is that there is a stark, drastic difference between multiple members of the community, and I don't actually think that the way society did or didn't see us affected whether or not that part of the community existed. To my knowledge and my understanding and my experience, it always has. That's literally how we got pride.
So you're being like kind of an anecdote Andrea here, right? So I understand that there are plenty of trans people who are in older generations that were very proud and very progressive, and they were out about it, and they weren't doing this like trans-medicalist rhetoric, but like just statistically speaking, from the data that I've seen, younger generations tend to be more progressive than the older generations, and in along with that, tend to be more proud. This just seems like the common thing, right?
I would love to see how that guarantees more proud. That's my difference. I won't argue on the definitely more progressive. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Have pride parades gotten bigger? Yes, but not just because more people are coming out. More people coming out is a partial factor, as well as tons of more allies because of the more progressive generations. But that doesn't change the factor that, like, to at least everything I can see, but you're just going to call me an anecdotal Andrea on it again.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm just giving
it drives me nuts when we have these talks, and that's why I don't usually bring it up until it's like really relevant in a conversation like this. Like the things I do literally interact with thousands of people documented daily, and I'm not even considering my online platform.
But that's anecdote still, and I understand. I completely get it. But we'll use anecdote again here, or just like sort of intuitive into it here, right? Like if you have younger generations being way more progressive, being way more accepting of certain groups of people, those groups of people are going to be way more likely to be out and proud about it, right? The more as society gets more accepting of gay people, pride parades are going to get bigger. This just seems to be, and gay people, especially younger ones, are going to be more proud and out about it, right? They're going to be feel more comfortable engaging in PDAs in public, right? This just seems to be intuitive.
No, that's actually wrong. Right? We're actually now seeing younger people having fears and regrets about coming out when they did, because there is now such a massive anti-trans movement and ideology and news. Like that's actually starting to completely be the opposite now. Younger people are still facing mass trauma in multiple states. Conversion therapy is still allowed, and there are tons, over 40% of homeless unaccompanied youth in the United States. Over 41% are LGBTQ youth that were abandoned for being LGBTQ.
Well, yeah, this is still a huge issue. This is why I do what I do, right? But this isn't an argument against the idea that society is more accepting of these groups than it used to be. We are seeing a bit of a populist fascist uprising, Trump getting elected, fascism is getting popular with a lot of people, but regardless, the data still shows that Gen Z is the most progressive generation ever. The millennials were the most progressive generation than any before that. Like, it just seems to be the what the data backs up.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how to respond to this. Because I've agreed that like it being more progressive is a thing. I've agreed that some levels of acceptance in society and social interaction is a thing. But we're also now seeing the exact opposite of what you're talking about, and less people coming out and more staying in the closet, which it will probably show in the 2020 trans survey, as we also saw numbers dropping in the 2019 trans survey. But none of them were even as well funded as the 2015 trans survey. So since you want to call me out on like it being anecdote, Andrea, let's go ahead and go to the actual statistical facts. The only well-funded, not even well-funded, the best funded trans survey we've ever had was 2015. Every other year, all the way up until the current one, pales in comparison, and all the ones before it pale in comparison. So we don't actually have any numbers to go off. What we have is what the LGBTQ community knows and interacts, because those are the only actual fucking anecdotes that can lead us to some idea of a statistical guess, because no one actually gives a fuck at a government or systemic level to actually document and understand and study these things.
So what's different? So what you're saying right now, I want to clarify really quick, is that trans acceptance or trans in the closet ability, I don't know how to word it, is down from 2015, right?
No, we're seeing a lot of younger people either with regrets to coming out because of negative reactions, and less people wanting to come out under the current atmosphere. They're like, do you know the laws that are literally being made in multiple states right now? Do you know that Trump is rewriting the ACA to make it to where every doctor at a federal level can refuse any level of care to a trans patient if they don't agree with trans people, which means you could literally...
No, this is why... Yeah, I know these things. This is what I argue against Bernie Busters about. This is why I don't like Bernie Busters, because they're willing to basically throw trans people under the bus because Biden bad. No, I completely know these things. And I was actually about to say, do you think maybe the reason why this rate of trans youth that are unwilling, that regret coming out, is because we have a fascist in power right now who is openly engaged in anti-trans rhetoric, banning trans people from the military, saying they're unfit to serve in any capacity in the military? You're ex-military, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
So you know that's bullshit, right? Even if we make the argument that some trans people may not be fit to, even if we go on like the given the most benefit of the doubt and say that some trans people may not be combat ready, which I still think is bullshit, we have our own separate like when you have to go under psychological tests, right, to make sure that you're fit to serve, right? And then even then, there's jobs like being a cook, there's graphic design, there's tons of non-combat related jobs that you can serve in the military that trans people are also not allowed to serve in anymore. Do you think when you have a president like that, that may be more of a reason for why these groups of people feel less welcome than just like society is regressing?
I don't like the idea of pinning it all just entirely on Trump. There's an entire right-wing movement, and there were issues before his election, but it has definitely like increased and impacted it, is how I just wouldn't prescribe it all to him, because just defeating him doesn't actually help a whole lot.
I think Trump is a big part of it, but I think the fascist populist push that brought him to power is probably also responsible for it. I don't think society in general has gotten less accepting, as so much the bigots within it have gotten more empowered, and they felt like this is their time. They want to push back because they know that it's socialism or barbarism, right? So they want to win before they realize that, like, the Zoomers are very openly very progressive. They're trying to get the Zoomer generation. That's why the alt-right rabbit hole is so effective and such an issue, right? That's why I advocate against it and talk about it so much and try to fight it. But I don't think in general, like, society is getting less progressive and less accepting of trans and LGBT people. In fact, that's an argument that I've heard a lot from reactionaries. People like Paul Joseph Watson will say, conservatism is the new punk rock. And it's actually not true. The data argues against that. Gen Z is really progressive. I would argue that the reason why we're seeing this phenomenon, why we're seeing a bit of a downtick in the amount of young LGBT or specifically trans people who are proud of being out, is most likely due to the fact that the power structure in which we live under, at least here in America, especially over in the UK, because Turf Island, right, is because this is a power structure which directly is attacking their identity, and they realize that this is a danger to them. Living in America as a trans person, or in any place as a trans person, is directly dangerous. This is a hostile administration towards them.
It's literally statistically impossible to argue against that point. This is impacting and making it worse, but the only redirection or correction I give it all on that is I don't want to pin it all on just Trump. There are state level laws being passed left and right that were being fought for and passing before Trump and will continue after Trump. It's actually a huge part of my rhetoric and conversation with the trans community. And I've got dozens of people who have moved out of states that have anti-trans laws because of my educating that have sent me like massive thank yous and all of that shit. I think the only thing we really disagree on that part is I don't want to prescribe it all to Trump. This I don't still exist with other conservatives and will continue to exist after Trump. Don't get me wrong, I've had to bite my pride and say I definitely am voting for Biden. I just fucking absolutely
same. We're Biden the bullet. We're Biden our time. That's what. Yeah. So I completely.
Let me butt in here for a second. And hey, I've never heard the expression "Turf Island" for the UK, so that one's a good new one to me too. Or Andrea, anecdote Andrea. That one's good too. I know this might be strange for some people watching this who may have come from the right or the far right or the alt-right pipeline or whatever that is on both sides. But if you're watching one of these conversations or debates or whatever you want to call it between lefties, I think it's really constructive because at the end of the day, this is not something that I know the far right does a lot of, where it's going to be like, we're going to discuss ideas, we're going to try and like find the best ways to do things. So out of curiosity between the two of you, coming from this, since you've been doing it for like over an hour and a half now, what would each of you want to see from the other party in terms of like, here's how I want you to either perceive me or better myself for the argument?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. One of the big things that I would really like to see is I don't think left unity is necessarily a good thing on its own, right? Like I don't want to team up with class reductionists in order to achieve like socialism, right? That's because they're just going to end up leaving marginalized people like trans people in the dust, right? They don't give a fuck about those groups. They think all of it is attributed to class, right? And fuck anybody else who's being hurt by any other system, right? I don't want to work with people like that, but I do agree with left solidarity, right? At least in regards to what we're trying to go for, right? So if someone like me and Izzybear here are striving for, I would assume, the exact same goal, I don't think if we laid out our ideal worldview, there would be a single area in which we disagree. I think we absolutely have the same end game. A bit of solidarity in the way that we do things, right? I think there is an extreme amount of value in what Izzybear is doing. I think just having more lefty content creators in general putting out content, broadening the net of people who may be caught up by it, is a good thing. But I see most of the antagonism coming from the more anti-debate bro side of the aisle, and I kind of wish that we could sort of come together and realize, like, hey, maybe you don't agree with all of our methods at times, but we're striving for the same goal. And if we work together and we form a cohesive pipeline, we can create an effective radicalization path for people to go down. For example, Sargon of Akkad may not believe in the Jewish question, as far as I'm aware. I mean, he seems to be a white nationalist, but but Richard Spencer still said he was a great pipeline to the alt-right and to neo-Nazism. You don't see people like Richard Spencer and people in his crowd going after him because they know that someone like Sargon making his videos about Anita Sarkeesian are going to lead people to Nazism, in the same way that me making my videos where I shit talk, no bullshit and whatnot, and Ariel Scarcella is going to lead them down the pipeline to watching people like you who maybe don't engage in that kind of rhetoric. I don't know exactly what you do, but are going to come across you and become part of your community. I just think that if we work together rather than fighting each other, we can form a very effective pipeline like what the right did. And I don't think it's bad for us to learn from their success and try to co-opt the good things that they were able to do, as in good, as in like it worked for them, into our methods. And that's basically what I would hope we would learn from this.
So my thoughts on this are pretty simple. I don't believe in leftist unity. Leftist solidarity comes to an extent. My immediate thoughts on that are, if you're using language, doing things, or saying things that are going to upset or harm marginalized community, you should not just completely cast out that, and you should always be open to the possibility of critique. And also, if you're going to continue using that because you think you make some kind of better impact with it, then you should not expect like all fucking marginalized people to stand and lift up your content, but also B, here's one that I see a lot. I haven't seen it with your community yet. I would hope that I don't, so this isn't a personal one. But just an overall general on this type of a convo, if you're doing that kind of rhetoric, you shouldn't expect those community members from your community to be able to come over here and have a good time saying shit that we don't allow in ours, because that happens constantly and people get so pissed when they catch a ban because I won't allow the same type of shit that other people who do this more harmful rhetoric to get their message across do. Basically, it's cis white gamer bros are going to do what cis white gamer bros are going to do, and if you're doing it with a left leaning, you have a chance to have some good positive impact, but you do still also create harm, and that you should be understanding of marginalized spaces existing for that reason.
But my goal isn't to have them be cis white gamer bros that are just lefty but they still like to say the N-word or the R slur. Our goal is to turn them into trans white gamer cat girls. That's the goal, right? And I like to think of it a bit like a rock tumbler, right? Back when I was younger, me and my grandma would do a lot of stuff with rock tumbling. And the way that it would work is you'd find some really jagged rocks that look pretty, like they look like they might have something cool inside, and you put them into the first stage of the rock tumbler. It's really jagged, it's very edgy, but you roll them through there, you take them out, and the edges are a little ground down a bit. Then you put them into the next stage, and you put them in there for a little while, you put it in with the stage 2 polish, and it gets it a lot more smoothed out. Then you put it into stage 3, you get a lot more smoothed out, and so on, until you get this perfect, polished, shiny rock that looks like you could put it into a necklace. It's a jewel, basically. It's gorgeous, almost unrecognizable from what you originally put in when you got into the rock tumbler. And I think that there's validity in being the first stage of the rock tumbler, because the other stages of the rock tumbler you can't put anything in there if you don't have that stage 1 that grinds down the main sharp edges. You need the stage 1, even if the stage 1 isn't necessarily as good at rounding out the edges as stage 2 or 3 or 4 or 5.
And like I said, I'm not gonna ban someone or create a banned list just based on fucking they sit in Xanderhal's channel or they sit in Vosh's channel or yada yada. But when people come in being problematic, they're still gonna catch that ban. Or if we're commenting on something that you've done that is harmful to a community and they get pissed off about it, like that fight's still gonna happen. Like I think the overall point of mine is no one is actually immune to critique. And though you're doing this with some like end goal and you think it's going to help achieve that end goal, that doesn't make it okay when it does actually cause some level of harm. And there will always be people trying to call that out.
Well, yeah, obviously I'm not talking about someone who comes in and they're like a fan of me or Vosh or Destiny and they come into your stream and they start saying the N-word or the R slur, saying really problematic stuff. But I'm talking about, let's say somebody who's a part of my community comes in and they drop the R slur in your chat. You're like, hey, don't do that. Listen, we don't allow that in this community. If you do it again, you're going to get punish, maybe it's a ban, maybe it's a timeout. I don't know how you do your ban system on your channel, but don't do that.
It kind of depends. I like to play with my food, and some people get a chance to come on and debate me. One of my emotes is literally post hog, but it's slurs are the hard line. I have a bunch of different marginalized representation in my community and in my mod team, and there's someone that will ban every fucking slur.
Okay, I can speak though, and this is where I would take a little bit of issue. I can speak for my community fairly authoritatively here, just because, you know, while I don't have data on this, I mean, it is my community. I would know it better than anybody else. That basically everybody who's a part of my community probably wouldn't even say a slur in the first place when coming into your chat, because I have a rule similar to Vosh where no one's allowed to be edgier than I am. I'm the line. If you're edgier than I am, you're a chud. But if they even came into your stream and said something like that, I guarantee that if you said, hey, that's not cool, they would immediately stop and wouldn't do it again. If they did, then they deserve a ban. They're probably not going to be welcome in my community either, because that's not the kind of people I want to harbor. But it just seems like being super quick to ostracize these people or just kick them out without, you know, even a warning, or trying to sort of, you know, tone down the edges on, or to try to grind down their edges that they still have. I feel like that can be pretty harmful, because we want to make these people, or these like edgy people, into not edgy people anymore. You want to be stage 2 or 3 or 4 of the rock tumbler. You know, stage 2 or 3 or 4 of the rock tumbler still has to do what it wants to do, or has to do if it wants to make that rock that originally went into a beautiful shiny gem. I
have helped de-radicalize multiple people. And I've done all of that without ever allowing slurs in my community. And
that's fine.
That first time catches a ban, I will be quick on it. There's a chance they can come and appeal for an unban. My mods will listen to it and have conversations and make me aware of it. But that's our hard line. That's the do not cross line. If you want to get like fucking edgy and say some dumb shit that's definitely leaning towards that yikesy, we're gonna talk about it. And then if you don't hold up, you like start getting worse, you're gonna catch the ban. But we just won't accept even the one time. Nobody gets the one time pass.
Why not? Like, if they say the R slur, for example, would you just immediately ban them? Like, you wouldn't say, hey, don't do that, and give them like a chance to realize, oh, that's not allowed here.
I don't think I've had a lot of people come in and say the R word, but I think I could say pretty confidently that that Patch, Monty, and Firebird would absolutely, and Sandrock would absolutely first time ban on that. Pretty sure my chat rules literally say no ableism.
Okay. I mean, I don't think most people read chat rules when they get into a stream, but I guess that can be their fault. But yeah, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it might be better to try to not necessarily embrace these people, but with a firm hand, as I do, you know, when I get a real edgy person in my community, we hand them with a firm hand. We put them into the chud zone. It's a specific quarantined area of my server where anybody who's like a verified member who isn't a chud can go in there, but they can go there, debate them on stuff, try to round off those edges so they can be introduced to normal society. I feel like trying to do that is valid. If you've got somebody who ostensibly agrees with you but is a bit too problematic with their language, isn't it worth trying to get that problematic aspect out of them?
If that's the case, then where are marginalized people going to be comfortable and safe? Do they really have to sit there and listen to it? Because in the list of mods I gave you, I don't want to say who is what or whatnot, but out of those identities, there's an autistic person, there are multiple disabled people, there are 2 trans people, there is a black person. Literally, just in my mod team, your slur is going to personally hit someone. My community isn't around de-radicalization. Yours is. We all know that. I even said in the tweet, stick to your lane of de-radicalization. Your lane of de-radicalization, though, ends at your content, your chat, and your community. If they come into mine and they bring that same level of edge, no, I don't have to open my space for them to be harmful for my community. My community does amazing shit. We focus on charity. We focus on education. I have literally directly helped raise $250,000 in the last year and a half about producing larger charity events for bigger content creators or running my own. Literally, and in that community, we have a very vast, very diverse audience that gives a fuck, and I will not let them be made uncomfortable or feel unwelcome in that space because somebody else wants to be edgy, and I should give a shit about that.
So do you disagree with like so you just don't really, we fundamentally disagree with the idea that it is good to be part of like a leftist pipeline. You're not really down for that. If it means that you have to sort of be part of the rock tumbler and you might get some people who are a bit too edgy than you're comfortable with in your community?
You can shoot somebody from your pipeline down to me when they've got the slurs out of their system. Then I'll actually debate and go at them all day. I'll talk with them in chat. I'll play with them. If they actually give something substantive, I can't even say it right now, substantive enough to have the fucking conversation, I'll pull them into Discord and we'll have a chat. But the slur is my hard no. That's never going to change.
Okay, I think that's where we fundamentally disagree, because the alt-right, when if we have like Andy Worski, when he gets because he's like a race realist now, I think he's like gone way down, like whatever's going on with him. But back in the golden days of the anti-SJW community, if someone came from Sargon of Akkad and didn't really believe in race realism or like the alt-right, and then came to Andy Worski and saw someone say, "Yeah, I don't know about this alt-right stuff" in chat, Andy Worski wasn't going to immediately ban them, because he knew that if they stayed in his community long enough, they were going to sort of get the edges sharpened, because the alt-right sharpens the edge. It's like a reverse rock tumbler, honestly. They were going to start adapting those beliefs and those behaviors just by being in that community. The same thing can happen on the left, but it just seems the right has such an effective pipeline. The left is kicking and screaming not to have an effective
If we
pipeline.
all focus on what you want out of this de-radicalization, where the fuck are the marginalized people supposed to be welcome at? You're literally telling them they have to be okay with those slurs.
No, they don't have to be okay with it. The point is to make those people stop saying the slurs. You can quarantine them, and what we do, we quarantine them. Vosh does the same thing. You can have a quarantine zone, so those who are comfortable engaging with that can have a place to talk with them and try to round off those edges. They don't need to be in chat all day saying the R slur. That's not what I'm advocating for. Obviously, I don't want to sacrifice the comfort of marginalized people in order to do this de-radicalization thing, and it's not necessary either. We can do this very effectively without making marginalized people feel like they're uncomfortable in these communities. Not like I don't know what percentage of my community is part of some marginalized group. Most of them are trans, but they are very comfortable with my community. They seem to be fine with it. It doesn't really seem to be an issue on my end. I don't think it has to be an issue on your end if you adopt these methods.
But I don't owe that to anyone with my platform or my content. I'm not here for edgy white gamer bros. The ones that I can reach and the ones that I do teach, I'm more than happy to. And I definitely have the patience to put up with a lot. I've done it live for 2 years. I'm very okay with taking the long, arduous educational conversation, the gritty, loud, hardcore debate. I match the tone of who I'm debating. If you had gone hard at me and been pissed off, well, this would have been a fucking heated ass debate. And I do the same thing to the edgy shitlords that come into my community hoping to dunk on a trans woman. I'm just fine with that reality all day. However, I will not throw my marginalized community members under the bus for any point. A slur is our hard no-go. That's just the period line. That's where I'm at.
Okay, so I guess
I don't mind that the slurs are over there with you and you've got your quarantine and you're trying to de-radicalize. I don't mind that the slurs pop up with Faraday and they've got their system and their de-radicalization channel. That's on y'all to regulate. However, my space prioritizes marginalized voices in existence.
So I think we've kind of established where you guys have a clear disagreement. So I don't know if you're going to move past that one point.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we can move on to another tweet that I had, because I had 4 total tweets and we're on the third one. Yeah, I guess we just fundamentally disagree on the idea that we need to be de-radicalizing these people who are falling down the alt-right pipeline. I think the alt-right pipeline is probably one of the biggest enemies of the online left right now, which I think is which we'll get into in a minute, the value of the online left. I just think that this needs to be combated very strongly. And I guess if you don't really care that much about it or don't want to be a part of that de-radicalization pipeline, that's fine.
I don't have a problem with the idea of de-radicalizing, and I've done so. Literally, one of my most ardent and longtime supporters was a Trump supporter who watched alt-right fucking content that has literally thanked me for my content de-radicalizing them. I know that feeling. I know the one that you love that gives you that fucking high. The same one as everyone else. The difference is I refuse to cater my entire community to it.
Okay. I guess we just disagree fundamentally then, because I think at all, not necessarily all costs, but we really do need to go nuclear on trying to fight the alt-right pipeline. But that's just where we disagree. That's fine. I guess, do you want to move on to another tweet that you made about me? And we can just sort of see where you stand on that?
What else? What you got?
Okay, I'm pretty sure this is vague tweeting me. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'll take actual activists over online debaters anytime. I hate hearing all these privileged whiners talk about how much impact they make. So I guess
that is in reference to you and 2 other people that I was having conversations with, but yeah, it was definitely right after you and I went at it. Yep.
Okay, so do you agree that like online debating isn't actual activism?
I wouldn't necessarily quantify all online debating as activism. Debate can be used in an activist style and can have some positive benefit, but largely the people doing it for sport, entertainment, and donos, absolutely not.
Okay, so I think online debate is probably, or like what I do, what Vosh does, is probably some of the most effective online activism you can really do, besides like stuff that directly affects the real world, like running fundraisers and organizing and stuff like that. I would say making propaganda is extremely important for online or for activism in general, especially on the internet. I think online activism.
How much do you think your online activism impact has directly affected the means or improved the quality of someone's life?
Probably quite a bit. I can go anecdote Andy for a minute and talk about the DMs I've gotten, or we can just
feel free. You can be anecdote in this one. I'll go anecdote in response to it. It's fine.
Sure. Actually, I'd like to start with the numbers really fast. I mean, I have a fairly large sub base. I mean, my channel's been skyrocketing in size. I get messages like every single day that I wake up to from people saying that, actually, most notably, I think I brought this up a few days ago. There was a guy who messaged me, won't say their name for obvious reasons, who was like, 6 months ago, I was suicidal. I was watching shit tons of alt-right content, and I was preparing to be the next Christchurch shooter. I was literally preemptively writing my manifesto for after I was going to shoot a place up. And I stumbled across you and Vosh and Destiny and ContraPoint's content, and my political views started to change, and along with that, my mood started to change. He was like cripplingly depressed while being a Nazi, right? This is just, I mean, that seems to be a side effect of being a Nazi. And this guy messaged me like with paragraphs, pouring his heart out to me, explaining that if it weren't for me and Vosh and just this anti-alt-right pipeline, like bread tube, he might have gone and shot up some fucking school or a synagogue or some shit. He didn't go too into detail, but he was definitely planning to either commit suicide or some kind of mass shooting or something, or mass like a terrorist attack type thing. And this has happened, right? We know that people like this get radicalized from the right, and we know that a lot of people have been de-radicalized from this type of content. Now, I know this is anecdotal. I guess I can point to my sub count and say that's an example, but I get messages every single day. I mean, I get my emails. I gotta sift through them every morning because I have ADHD, and I can't let there can't be a number next to my Discord icon. If there's even if I have one ping, I have to make it go away. So I read all these messages, and I'm constantly getting notifications from people telling me that if it weren't for my content, and as well as others, of course, I'm not going to say I was the sole reason, that they might have possibly killed themselves, or they would still be reactionaries, or they could have done much worse things, the example we just gave there. So unquestionably, my content existing and me doing what I'm doing is helping people. Now, is online activism doing more than IRL activism? I don't feel qualified to make that claim. I don't think it really matters. I think online activism is unquestionably valuable, and I don't feel comfortable with trying to minimize the effect of online activism, especially because the internet is the largest platform for spreading information on the planet, possibly in the universe, depending on, whether or not extraterrestrial life exists,
So here's what you won't expect. I won't condemn you for the anecdote that someone sent you that amazing paragraph or multiple paragraphs. That had to be fucking awesome. Congratulations. It's awesome that you did help that person. That's great. However, I don't know if I put that on par with activism. I would more put it as like good like rhetoric and education and like availability. And I still don't know how. In that instance, I absolutely see how you stopped someone or possibly multiple someone's from being killed, which is amazing. I get you. I feel it. But beyond that, what does your debate bro do that you would quantify as like activism or actual direct impact besides like stopping some people from being hateful shits? What do you do to actually like lift someone's actual value of life? What do you do to improve someone's quality of life outside of de-radicalizing some chuds?
Do we disagree on the definition of activism? I think producing leftist propaganda and like education is activism. If you aren't like on the ground,
I guess it's arguable that it could be quantified as activism, yes. But there's a reason that I clearly separated on IRL activists to online in that tweet, and I could have went ahead and just worded it to the online activist, especially debate bros or whatever, happily. But I do actually see a distinct difference, but I still even use those same tools in my online community, which is where I make a huge difference. And it's what I see other IRL activists who are now functioning online doing the exact same of.
So I don't know what you do on your stream, Izzy, but do you do like quite a bit of what I do, like debating sometimes and like covering videos and talking about things and educating people?
I did that all of last year, and I ended up in a very negative mental health place. I had multiple harmful campaigns ran against me. I was a non-passing trans woman on the top of live stream fails twice that literally led to hundreds of thousands of KYS and suicidal ideation and all of the slurs. It was pretty shitty experience. And I realized that in the midst of my peak there, where I was holding like in between 150 to 300 viewers, and I was actually like doing this big climb, and I had this shot right in the peak of it. I raised the money for a trans youth to go and get top surgery. They had already paid for the surgery, but they had no way to get themselves from Maine to Boston back to Maine safely. And in one night, I raised the money to cover them the trip down, a hotel, the trip back, and feed them while they were healing. And that should have been this major thing, because this is a youth that I give a fuck about and I know and I work with personally. And I was really excited for a couple of minutes, and then I ended stream and I received an email where I was denied Twitch partner again. And I was so pissed off and upset and mad that I didn't even celebrate the factor that I had just seriously changed someone's fucking life. So I kind of reevaluated my stream, and I've started focusing back more towards the charity and fundraising that we care more about. And I occasionally do some React Andrea now, and I'm starting to reintegrate politics and debate. But I'm going to try and do so at a healthy level that lets me maintain better mental health.
Okay. Well, going back to the question, that's a cool story. But even if you hadn't done that, like the getting the trans person top surgery, do you think what you do or did with your content before that was activism?
I was still constantly raising thousands of dollars for amazing causes, mutual aid, direct impact.
Even if you weren't doing that, even just the fact that you were spreading your rhetoric, you were making educational content from a leftist pro-trans perspective, you were actively, engaging in leftist rhetoric and creating entertainment for leftists to educate them and whatnot. Do you not consider that activism?
I mean, I kind of feel like I've already caved at this point, and I'm not sure why you're trying so hard to drive it home. I said I could have reworded that tweet to where it was like offline and online activism. I've given you that already. Okay.
It just seems like you're sort of minimizing, and this is where I take the actual issue. It just seems like you're minimizing that. I'll take actual activists over online debaters. Do you think that like in real life, like on the ground activism is better than online activism?
Oh, do you actually want like the context of that and what's going through my mind when I tweeted it? Because you haven't asked.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's what I was hoping you would do. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear enough.
Oh yeah, no. For me, that tweet was really simple. When it comes to dealing with IRL activists over online activists, you actually tend to find people who do less harmful shit regularly, and people who are genuinely focused on like higher impact and like direct aid of people in need. Whereas online, you get this idea that you're doing good and you get evidence and can quite often do good, but you still have the ego to it that negatively impacts certain levels of it. Whereas when you're dealing with IRL activists who then transition to online activism, you seem to have a much cleaner cut and much more focused type of activism that works way fucking calmer and better for marginalized or at-risk people, in my opinion.
Okay, and I think the reason for that is, one, online activists tend to reach more people. Just sort of the rhetoric tends to reach a lot more people because it's available on the internet. The internet is the number one source of information anybody is going to go to generally. But also, when you're an online activist or an online figure like I am, you're also in the eyes of thousands of people constantly. Your Twitter account, your stream. I broadcast myself for, and you know this because you're a streamer too. I broadcast myself for hours and hours a day live. There's no take backs. If I mess up with the wording of something, somebody can easily clip it. You know about LSF. You know there's entire communities of people, these little fucking vultures that are swirling above, waiting to clip you saying something so it can get trending on LSF, because you know those people love to shit on a trans person because it's a bunch of gamer people on Twitch with the ferociously stuff happening right now. You know that's a thing, right? I don't think this is so much that like on or out like on the ground activists are less problematic than online activists are, so much as it is proportionally speaking. When a real life activist generally goes home, they're just in the safety of their own home, right? But when I do my thing, I'm constantly on the internet. If I say something that maybe isn't worded too well, it's going to get clipped, it's going to be tossed around. My Twitter is, popping off, and everyone's going to see it and whatnot. I'm just in the eyes of a lot of people, so anything I do that is problematic is going to be detected a lot easier. This generally isn't the case when you have on the ground.
In return, you're now massively underplaying IRL activism because you actually have no idea what IRL activism is like. I just have to throw it in.
Han, what is your definition of activism?
I have literally traveled over halfway across this country, sleeping less than 3 hours a night to do shit and get shit done for multiple fucking events, movements. We call June Hell Month. This year is going to be exempt because Pride is canceled. But we literally hit every Pride in the state and are nonstop from June 1st all the way to the fucking last day of June. We are in a different part of the state doing whatever we need to for that fucking Pride. We're on the Pride planning committee for most of the fucking Prides in the state. So for the 3 months up to it, we're still working on those. Learning how to fucking put together a press release, actually learning how to get the press to respond to you, traveling and engaging in talking, going to different conferences and multiple fucking rallies, protests, fundraising events, running actual fundraisers. And that's the type of shit that then online you can learn to do 10 times fucking amazing. That's why I can very proudly make the statement I did that I've raised over 250,000. I've directly helped raise over 250,000 in the last year and a half in online fucking activism. And that's not even counting the fundraising I've done in fucking real life. That's just what we've done through Twitch. That's like where I fucking produced Philosophy Tube's Shakespeare stream and we made 133,000 on just that one fucking weekend. Like literally, the possibility to make direct impact is there, and with people who only focus on online, they care about what you're trying to say and about how you're trying to make good rhetoric and you're trying to change people's minds, and there's definitely use for propaganda. You're not wrong, but I'll take IRL fucking activists any day because they're not fucking hesitant to actually put boots on the ground. They're not hesitant to actually go and fight for what they fucking believe in, and they will run themselves into the ground time and time again.
All right. Okay. We're kind of doing an activism comparison measuring thing right now. Why don't we move it on to maybe the fourth tweet? Because I think you've been going back and forth on the same point for a while.
That was the fourth tweet.
Oh, that was the fourth tweet. Oh.
Wait, was that the fourth? Let me check really fast. I wanted to ask. I was actually curious because I wanted to ask 2 more questions. So I don't think it was necessarily a definition of what you think activism is. I'm like genuinely curious, where do you draw the line between what is activism and what isn't activism? Because like you listed a lot of things that you've done, and that's super cool. I could do the same. I mean, my rhetoric has reached, I think, what was it, like 100, like dozens of countries, right? Tens of thousands of people. Actually, no, I have like millions of views on my channel now, so millions of people. I would say, like, I could list my achievements as well. I'm just really curious where your definition of activism lies.
I've already told you that like online activism is also a thing and it counts, but there's a reason I prefer IRL activists to online activists. That's the difference that you don't seem to grasp. Is you think I'm saying that you don't do any activism or any activist style work, which isn't the case. I am simply stating I have a clearer preference to work with this type over that type.
Okay. Did you think because you said that you thought that I was minimizing the effectiveness of on the ground, IRL activism? I don't feel like I did that.
You literally like went on this huge rant about how like online makes the huge impact and like God, man, somebody'd have to go fucking clip it now. I don't remember the exact fucking quote you just said. But IRL people don't have that same reach or that same impact, and like, dude, I interact with thousands of people's lives IRL on a regular basis. Now that I'm disabled and focusing more on my content creation, I still reach thousands. And I've reached way more than that when I was actively able to do more and willingly and voluntarily doing more. I don't think you understand how much like IRL activism can include because you're so focused on what online activism includes.
I think both of you value both forms. It's just in this situation, Izzy, you seem to think that IRL is more important, right? That's what we're coming down to.
I don't even know that I'd fully call it more important. Both have their own importances and value. It's just when it comes to actually working with people, I prefer IRL activists, whether they are now online activists as well and have moved into the digital platform, because those are people who tend to cut the bullshit a lot fucking better, in my opinion.
Okay, I don't think that's what I said. I think what I said was on because I write down what I'm about to say as I'm listening to you. Online activism reaches more people generally because the internet is such a massive, communicator, right? This is the largest information communication platform ever. It's the internet. And I said that when you're an online activist, you're in the eyes of way more people, which in the sense that way more people are going to see any little fuck up you might make, and so you see a lot more problematic behavior coming from online activists because they're constantly being seen. Their lives are being broadcasted to the internet, and nothing on the internet ever goes away, right? While IRL activists, unless we're talking about very specific people, generally aren't going to be broadcasted constantly. Every single action they engage in public and in private.
Well, when you put it to that, yes, like they're not going to be as broadcast as often. That still doesn't change the factor that you see a lot less problematic shit from IRL activists, at least in my fucking experience, which is why I put a tweet out that didn't at anyone specifically that I really fucking prefer on the IRL activists to online ones. That's it. Literally, the tweet you're really fucking honing in on is a preference. That's it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess that was the fourth tweet as well. So,
and like on that, like if you really want to like fucking hone in on this topic, like how much have you directly done? Can you use your platform for better? Have you done fucking multiple fundraisers? Have you done a big, huge charity drive? You definitely have the fucking following and the backing. Maybe you could fucking put my foot in my mouth, like go actually fucking make impact, use it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it would be a cool idea to do like a charity stream where I make a bunch of money for some sort of like charity or fundraiser or something like that. Right now, basically literally every dollar I make is going into like subsidizing my existence, right? Like I do this for a job, I have to pay bills, I have to buy myself groceries, so I don't have a lot of extra money to put aside for anything that doesn't either go into improving my stream or keeping me alive and sheltered, right? But I mean, once I'm a certain size, of course, to be down to do charity streams and stuff like that. But I still think that the even if I wasn't even planning on doing any of that, the propaganda that I create is producing leftists. I am creating leftists and giving them a place to organize and come together. I'm pretty sure I've created at least more than one activist, right? I mean, has my community not been a place where that could produce activists? If I was a machine creating activists,
tell you, like, have you told people how to get more involved in IRL activism? I don't consume your content. I'm not saying this in a judgmental way, but have you? Because people in this chat are literally asking, can Izzy explain how to get more involved in IRL activism? And that's one of the things I get asked constantly. I explained it to 8,000 people on fucking Philosophy Tube stream. Like, are you actually creating activists who are going out there and making direct change?
I mean, I've never done like IRL activism very much. I guess probably when I was younger, I might have, but in regards to that, I mean, I've platformed a lot of people who know about this stuff, particularly, I don't know if you know who Liability Lefty is.
I do.
Yeah, I platformed them because I think they're pretty good to talk to in regards to like how to do IRL activism. They're pretty good on that. I enjoy platforming people who talk about that stuff, but I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that I'm like the arbiter of knowing how, or even knowing like a sufficient amount about online or IRL activism to get people to, or like tell them how they could do that, right? But I'd like platforming people who can, and even if that wasn't the case, I gather people in a way in which they can get together, talk to people, they get their minds changed towards leftism, and they're way more likely to come together and actually start engaging.
You're creating like theory heads that like to talk and think and like tweet and interact about leftism and like creating leftist ideology and people who believe in leftist ideology. But are you creating anyone who actually engages in it, like hands-on, does some shit to try and better the means of the lower class or of marginalized people or of fucking any cause you can get behind?
Okay, so I feel like you're actually trying to minimize the effect that I have now.
Oh, no, I'm really not. I just said that you make like a fuck ton of leftists, but you literally just said it to me in a way that makes it sound like you make a bunch of people who think and act and talk and interact as leftists and believe as leftists. But like, are you actually making activists? Like, are you actually doing anything to further the gains? This isn't like a fucking insult. This is a like, hey, if you want to talk to someone about how to get involved in IRL activism, I'll do it. I could also recommend several other people if you don't want to fucking work with me. We can plan some shit like that. Like, if you want to do an online fundraiser, dude, I have some of the biggest bread tubers pay me to be their producer. I'll happily help fucking set that shit up and teach you how to do it. I do it all the fucking time. I hold full streams about how to do it, and other people have spawned to do it off of me. That's what I mean by people who want to make direct impact. is it's not just this idea of creating like propaganda and the thought and creating these people who accept this idea. It's great that you do that, but we do actually also need to make some fucking impact at some point. You need to change
So my chat,
the value of people's life.
now I can't know with beyond a reasonable doubt how many people I have radicalized to the left and made them into activists, but I can say my chat right now is extremely mad because they're all like, I do activism, you made me a leftist and I do activism. Maybe it could be lying, maybe they're just trying to make me look good, but
I hope they're not
that.
Like,
and then even if we don't go out by the anecdotes of people in my chat, we can actually. I think I did participate in a couple charity streams, but I won't really. That doesn't really matter. But in regards to that, we can just look at the numbers, right? I think I'm about to hit 27,000 subs. Do you think 27,000 leftists following me, at least a fair amount of them, or a significant amount of them, I played a significant part in de-radicalizing them from the center? De-radicalizing.
I don't know how many pre-existing
but brought them over to the left.
You.
How many of them
pre-existing leftists followed you? I don't know. I don't think you have that info
amount.
either. I'm not trying to belittle it. I just don't think we actually actively know, do we? Just like I'm not saying there are no activists in your community. I'm saying, are you doing anything to actually further that? Because that's what I see as the difference in impact. Is there's the agitprop and like helping create leftist ideology and trying to like shift that fucking Overton window, and then there's creating direct impact to try and help communities that need it.
Well, I definitely am. My chat is saying yes, he does. But even if we ignore that, because maybe they're lying, right? But I mean, even if we ignore that,
I'm not dismissing any of them. I have no reason to believe that all of them would be lying. Like that's good if that's happening. That was more as an actual question, not an insult. You seem to be taking it as an insult.
No, I'm not. I just know that there are people who will, not you, but people who are watching. I want to make it very clear that I acknowledge the possibility that maybe people in chat right now aren't telling the truth, and that maybe they're just saying it to make me look good. But I do think, at least statistically speaking, with the amount of people that I reach, unquestionably, a lot of those people are engaging in activism, and unquestionably a lot of those people are spreading the rhetoric as well. How many of my fans do you think go to school and they talk to their friends about leftism? Maybe they learn rhetoric from me. Me and Vosh, and I use this document as well, and I've made my own version of it that I've added to, have created a document which backs up a lot of our beliefs. The validity of trans people, we got a shit ton of stuff, of evidence and studies and meta-analysis and data to back up that. Just a whole document of data that you can use to back up your beliefs, academically speaking. We spread that around. We make it so even our own fans can do their own thing, use that data to go to people in their real life, go to people online, and learn from that in order to help spread leftism themselves, instead of it just being us spreading it. It's like a web, the web comes off of me and hits somebody else, and it spreads off to more people because they do their own rhetoric and their own activism. Now, sure, granted, unquestionably, the majority of people who watch my content are probably just going to be theory heads on the internet who sit on Twitter and they watch YouTube and stuff like that. But that's most people who engage online. It's just most people in general, right? But through doing my content, I am unquestionably creating a lot of people who are going to go out and engage in IRL activism.
So we've been going back and forth on the same topic for a while now. It's still the same thing, right? We're still talking about which kind of activism do you value more? Is yours more valuable? Is this IRL versus online, right?
It all plays directly off of that. Like my whole point in asking was like, how much impact could you be doing? How much of that could you get behind? Dude, I know tons of like broke, tiny, small streamers that have already raised like thousands for other fucking people. Like there's a whole fucking interconnected community that follows Butterhorse here doing it. It's a huge fucking ideology of actually trying to make fucking direct impact. And that's all I was saying. And that's why I prefer IRL activists, is because they usually carry that shit into their online as well. And they do actually high focus on direct impact, not just creating the ideology. Fucking, it doesn't dismiss what you do. I just have a preference in who I work with. And that's what that fucking angry tweet was about.
Okay. When I close my eyes and I think of the ideal future where the left is one, I think of we have these massive media figures who reach thousands, millions, tens of millions of people to spread leftist propaganda. Then we got the people in the streets who are empowered and learned from that leftist propaganda and gained class consciousness and became progressive from it. And they're the ones that are on the boots, that have their boots in the ground doing the activism. But you have to have people who are spreading propaganda. Propaganda is, just to me, seems like it's probably one of the most important aspects of a movement, right? You need to get the word out. And the internet just seems to be an effective way of doing that.
I think that's only going to do so much unless we're actually creating action. I think we need actual action to come from it.
I mean, I do everything. I guess I do everything I can do. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'll radicalize as many people as I can, and unquestionably a significant amount of them. When the time comes, will get their boots on, go outside, and do the revolution. Maybe I'll be joining if it's the time, right? But you have to have the propaganda out there. It has to exist. I guess we just kind of disagree on that.
I don't fully think we fully disagree here. Like, I've never said that you don't need the propaganda or the agit-prop side of it. I've shown a preference towards working with IRL activists and why I prefer it. Like, the propaganda machine is great and you can do so much with it, but unless you're actually churning out people who will do actual activism work, are we going to have any fucking impact at the end of the day?
Okay, I guess we'll just like sum it up as just being sort of like a not greatly worded tweet, right? Because it's Twitter, right? So, okay. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, I think that's covers most of ours for the most part. We covered everything we took issue with.
Well, yeah, I guess it's time for me to say that this debate was brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. Catch the Walrus. All characters now available for only $4.99. Use I want to thank both of you. Both of you came in really good faith in this. I think there's very very little moments where I actually even had to pipe in. It was nice low effort from my side. Do you guys both want to do shoutouts? Because I mean, I think you and me have had like 400 people watching most of it, Xanderhal. So it'd be good to promote everyone's relative links.
I'll let you go first, Izzybear. You can do your thing.
Most of the Serfs community already knows me. Hi to everyone from Xanderhal's. I wasn't ignoring you all on Twitter. I just got reached out to about this possibly turning into a debate pretty quick, so I waited so we could have it here. Hope you all learn something, take something away from this. I at the end of the day, I think I can agree that Xanderhal and I don't agree on a lot of the big overall picture things. I think we just have these little finite details that we're gonna butt heads on. But overall, yeah, thanks for actually coming on and having an actual conversation about it. Thanks for keeping it respectable. I was wondering if this was going to get heated or not. I'm Izzybear713 on like all platforms. If you want the unapologetic trans woman the internet warned you about, I'm here.
My name's Xanderhal. I'm 20 years old. I do YouTube streaming and stuff like that. I focus on leftist content. I try to make as much... I respond usually to reactionary arguments. A significant amount of my content is admittedly dedicated to talking about trans rights because I think it's a pretty relevant issue that needs to be talked about and, signal boosted. And, you can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Xanderhal. I got a website, xanderhal.com/live. And, yeah, if you're interested, come check it out.
Awesome. And I'm Lance, the clown from the Serfs. You can find me at twitch.tv/theserfstv. And thanks so much to both of you. That was awesome. Great combo.
Oh yeah.
Lance, thanks for having us on and modding as always.
All right. Bye everybody.
Have a good one.
Oh hey chat. How you doing? How's everyone feeling? I wanna thank all of you. Yeah, we can have a little candy. There's time for some candy. Definitely. Let me switch rooms here. Where's the... Oh, there we go. This is better. Ooh, yeah, that feels good. Ugh. Now I get to be my true self. I get to be the true Lance on the internet. Yeah, that was great. Good conversation. I thought both of them got a lot of really good points on. Thanks for having everyone. Of course, Sandrock. Thanks for being here. It's been amazing. Hey, No Comment Chick. Good to see you too. Twitch.tv/No Comment Chick. Go sub to her. And Mindwaves is here. Go twitch.tv/MindwavesTV. Also, go sub to follow content creators. Give them follows. There's no transitionary state for trans rights. No appeasing. We need complete autonomy over our bodies and the means bodily modification. Contra-style appeasers are from yesterday. We need trans anarchism now. Everybody,